The weak exist to serve the strong. Those words echoed through Serena Moonshade's mind as she gathered herbs in the fading twilight at the edge of Ironwood territory. 23 years of hearing that mantra had etched it into her soul like an unwanted tattoo. The forest around her hummed with approaching winter, branches heavy with the promise of snow, the air crisp enough to make each breath visible in small, fleeting clouds. Serena moved with quiet efficiency, her small form barely disturbing the underbrush as she identified and harvested the last winter root that would survive the coming freeze. Her fingers, nimble despite the cold, worked with practiced precision. This particular herb was rare, growing only in the shadow of ancient pines, and it had taken her 3 days to locate this small patch. Its healing properties for respiratory ailments would be essential in the harsh months ahead. The forest grew darker around her as twilight surrendered to night. Serena straightened, her back aching from hours bent over the forest floor. The leather satchel at her hip now bulged with her findings. She was small for a werewolf, even for an omega, with dark hair falling in a thick braid down her back and eyes the color of forest moss after rain. Those eyes scanned the darkening woods, alert to any change in the familiar symphony of forest sounds. In the distance, the lights of the Ironwood pack house glimmered through the trees, a grand structure of stone and timber that housed 30 wolves. Her home was not there. Omegas rarely lived in the main house. Her cabin stood apart at the very edge of pack territory, a small structure that had once been a storage shed before being repurposed as her dwelling. The roof leaked. The walls let in drafts that made winter nights nearly unbearable. But it was hers, the only space where she wasn't constantly reminded of her place in the pack hierarchy. The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of wood smoke and roasting meat. The pack was gathering for the evening meal, a ritual from which she was typically excluded unless her services were specifically required. Serena turned toward her cabin, then hesitated as another scent caught her attention. Blood and the distinct musk of a pack wolf. She followed the scent, moving quickly now, her wolf senses guiding her through the growing darkness. Behind a fallen oak, she found him. Young Elliot, barely 16, one of the pack's newest members. He lay curled in pain, clutching his leg where a crude hunting trap had nearly severed it at the ankle. Elliot's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with the pride typical of young wolves. "I don't need help from an omega." Serena ignored his words, already kneeling beside him and assessing the wound. The trap's teeth had cut deep, tearing through muscle and scraping bone. "You've lost blood. The wound needs cleaning before infection sets in." "I said I don't need your help," he growled, though the sound was weak, undermined by the paleness of his face. "My father says omegas only weaken the pack." Serena's hands moved with methodical precision, opening her satchel and selecting herbs. "Your father, Beta Reiner, came to me last month when his hunting wounds wouldn't heal." She crushed dried yarrow between her fingers, combining it with antiseptic pine resin. "He made the same speech before accepting my medicine." Surprise flickered across the boy's face, followed quickly by suspicion. "You're lying." "I have no reason to lie." Serena applied the poultice directly to the wound, causing Elliot to hiss in pain. "Hold still. The numbing effect will begin soon." From her satchel, she removed a roll of linen bandages, tearing a length with her teeth. "This trap is silver-laced. That's why your natural healing isn't working." The boy's face paled further. Silver was toxic to werewolves, disrupting their accelerated healing and causing intense pain. "Silver? But that's forbidden in pack territories." Serena nodded, wrapping the bandage with practiced efficiency, which means someone said it deliberately. She tied off the bandage and helped him to a sitting position. "Can you shift? Your wolf form will help distribute your weight better on 3 legs." Elliot nodded, his young face now etched with both pain and confusion. As he shifted, fur rippling across his form in the transformation from boy to wolf, Serena gathered her supplies. The russet-colored wolf tested his injured leg gingerly, then looked at Serena with something approaching grudging respect. "Don't put weight on it for at least 2 days," she instructed, shouldering her satchel. "The herbs will draw out the silver toxicity, but you need rest." Together they made their way back toward the pack house, moving slowly through the darkening forest. As they approached the clearing, lights blazing from every window of the grand structure, Serena saw the familiar, imposing figure of Beta Reiner waiting on the porch, his face a mask of fury. "Elliot, where have you been?" Reiner's rage turned to shock as he saw his son's injured form, then quickly morphed to suspicion as he noticed Serena. "What have you done to my son, Omega?" Serena kept her voice steady, her eyes downcast in the show of submission expected from her rank. "He was caught in a silver-laced trap at the western boundary. I treated the wound and helped him home." Reiner's eyes narrowed as he descended the steps, his powerful frame towering over Serena. At nearly 6.5 feet tall with shoulders like granite, he physically embodied the beta rank he held with such pride. "A silver trap? In our territory?" His hand shot out, gripping Serena's arm hard enough to bruise. "What were you doing in the western forest? Those are not your gathering grounds." Before Serena could answer, Elliot's wolf form moved between them, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The sound was protective, instinctive, and it clearly shocked Reiner as much as it did Serena. Reiner released her arm, his expression darkening further. "Get inside, Elliot. The healer will look at your leg." He shot a dismissive glance at Serena's handiwork. "And remove whatever concoction the Omega put on you." Elliot hesitated, looking between his father and Serena, then limped toward the pack house, his movements clearly less pained than they had been in the forest. Reiner watched him go, then turned back to Serena, his voice lowered to a threatening growl. "Stay away from my son, Omega. Your place is to serve when called upon, not to wander where you don't belong." Serena lowered her gaze again, the picture of submission, though her voice remained steady. "The silver trap concerns the entire pack. Alpha Victor should know about it." Reiner's laugh held no humor. "I'll inform our Alpha of anything he needs to know. Your concern should be gathering the winter stores you've been assigned, not playing at pack politics." He leaned closer, his breath hot against her face. "Remember your place, Omega, or we might decide your little cabin is too generous a provision for one who contributes so little." With that, he turned and strode back to the pack house, leaving Serena alone in the growing darkness. She stood motionless until he disappeared inside, then exhaled slowly, tension draining from her shoulders. The encounter had gone better than most. At least this time, there had been no physical reminders of her status. Serena walked the longer path around the pack house, avoiding the windows and the eyes that might look out to see her passing. Her cabin lay just beyond the tree line, a small structure nearly invisible in the darkness. As she approached, she noticed something unusual. The single window glowed with faint light. Caution slowed her steps. She had left no candle burning. The scent on the air was familiar but unexpected, lavender and sage, mixed with the distinct musk of an aging wolf. Serena pushed open the door to find old Morris seated at her small table, his weathered hands cradling a steaming mug of tea. "Took you long enough, girl," he grumbled, though there was no heat in his words. "Tea's getting cold." Morris had been the pack's head guard in his prime, decades ago when Serena's father had served as the Alpha's right hand. Now, aged and arthritic, he maintained a ceremonial position, respected for his years of service, but no longer influential in pack matters. He was one of the few who treated Serena with any kindness, having known her parents before the sickness took them. "Morris." Serena set her satchel down, eyeing the old wolf with a mixture of affection and suspicion. "You rarely leave the main house these days." He pushed a second mug toward her. "Didn't come for pleasantries. Came to warn you." Serena took the offered tea, warming her cold hands around the ceramic. "About the silver traps? I found one today. Elliot was caught in it." Morris's eyes narrowed, the pale blue of winter ice. "Not just traps. Storms coming." "Winter is always coming in these mountains." "Not winter. Something worse." Morris leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Victor received word this morning. Worst blizzard in a century heading our way. 3 days, maybe less." Serena's grip tightened on her mug. A century storm could mean death for any wolf caught unprepared, even for the strongest among them. The pack needs to prepare, reinforcements for the structures, extra supplies, emergency protocols. Victor's calling a meeting tonight, full pack assembly. Morris fixed her with a pointed stare. He's not planning to include you. The words shouldn't have stung after so many years of similar treatment, yet they did. Serena set her mug down, her expression carefully neutral. I'm still pack. In name only, according to our illustrious Alpha. Morris reached into his jacket and removed a small object wrapped in oiled cloth. Your father would have never tolerated what's become of this pack. The old ways meant something then. Omega wasn't an insult, but a position of honor. He placed the wrapped object on the table between them, his gnarled fingers lingering on it. This belonged to your father. Victor ordered all his possessions destroyed after the sickness, but I kept this hidden. Time you had it back. Serena unwrapped the cloth with reverent care. Inside lay a dagger unlike any she had seen before. The blade gleamed with an almost blue-white sheen, the handle carved from bone and etched with symbols she didn't recognize. Pure silver, Morris explained, watching her reaction closely. Forged with wolfsbane and blessed by the old shamans, a guardian's weapon. Serena nearly dropped it in shock. Silver? But this would kill any werewolf who wielded it. Morris's smile revealed teeth still sharp despite his age. Any normal werewolf, yes, but your father carried it for 30 years without harm. Your mother, too, when needed. How is that possible? The Moonshade bloodline is special, girl. Always has been. Morris tapped the symbols etched into the bone handle. These marks tell the story. Your ancestors were guardians, tasked with maintaining balance. Silver harms those who seek dominion, not those who seek harmony. Serena traced the unfamiliar symbols with her fingertip, feeling a strange warmth emanate from the weapon. It should have burned her skin, caused pain at the very least, yet it felt almost welcoming in her grasp. Why give this to me now? Because storm's coming, and not just the weather kind. Morris's expression grew grave. Victor's been meeting with strangers. Wolves not from any pack I recognize. They speak of Operation Red Moon and restoring the natural order. Whatever they're planning, it's tied to this blizzard somehow. Serena carefully rewrapped the dagger, her mind racing. You think Victor is planning something during the storm? When the pack will be vulnerable? I think you should be ready to run when the time comes. Morris stood with effort, his joints protesting the movement. Keep that dagger close. Trust no one, especially not Victor or Reiner. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her with unexpected emotion in his weathered face. Your parents would be proud of what you've become, despite everything this pack has done to break you. After Morris left, Serena sat alone in her small cabin, the silver dagger heavy in her hands, despite its modest size. Outside, the wind had begun to strengthen, carrying the first flakes of snow that heralded the coming storm. She crossed to the far corner of the single room and knelt beside her bed, pulling from beneath it a wooden box inlaid with faded silver wire. The lock opened at her touch, a mechanism her mother had designed that responded only to a Moonshade's hand. Inside lay her most precious possession, her mother's herbal journal. Unlike ordinary herbalist texts, this one contained knowledge passed down through generations of healers, some entries dating back centuries. Serena opened the weathered cover, the familiar scent of herbs and ink rising from the pages. Her mother's elegant handwriting filled most of the book, but the oldest sections were inscribed in hands unknown to her, in languages she could only partially decipher. She turned to the section on silver poisoning, scanning the detailed drawings and instructions. According to pack lore, silver was anathema to all werewolves, a metal that burned their flesh and poisoned their blood. Yet here were recipes for silver antidotes, methods for handling silver safely, even treatments that incorporated minute amounts of silver for specific ailments. Knowledge forbidden by current pack law, deemed heretical by those in power. Serena closed the journal, returning it to its hiding place with the dagger nestled beside it. Whatever storm was coming, both literal and figurative. She would face it with every resource at her disposal. The weak might exist to serve the strong, as pack doctrine insisted, but Serena Moonshade had never truly believed she was weak. Different, perhaps, but not weak. Never weak. The pack meeting convened under a sky heavy with the promise of snow. From her position near her cabin, Serena watched wolves arriving at the main house, their forms silhouetted against the golden lights spilling from the windows. All were welcome except her. With quiet determination, she circled around to the back of the structure where a small ventilation window would allow her to hear the proceedings. She had used this vantage point before, gathering information that those in power would have denied her. Knowledge was survival for an Omega in a pack that viewed her as disposable. Alpha Victor's voice carried easily to her hiding place, his tone commanding the attention of every wolf present. 3 days. That's how long we have to prepare for what the meteorologists are calling a storm of the century. Winds exceeding 100 miles per hour. Temperatures dropping to lethal levels. Snow accumulation measured in feet, not inches. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. Victor continued, his voice taking on the reassuring cadence of a leader who had everything under control. The main house has been reinforced. Generators are fueled and tested. We have provisions to last 2 weeks if necessary. Every pack member will shelter here until the danger has passed. Every member? The question came from a female voice Serena recognized as belonging to Morris's granddaughter, Fiona. Even Serena? A moment of charged silence followed. Serena pressed closer to the window, straining to hear the response. Reiner's voice answered instead of Victor's. Resources must be allocated according to value and contribution. The Omega's cabin is sturdy enough for one wolf, and she has her herbs to sustain her. But the forecast suggests temperatures that could kill even in shelter without proper heating, Fiona persisted. Her cabin barely keeps out rain, let alone Arctic cold. The decision has been made. Victor's tone brooked no further discussion. Now, to more important matters. During this storm, we have an opportunity. An opportunity to demonstrate our strength, our preparedness, our superiority as a pack. Serena frowned at the odd shift in topic. What opportunity could possibly arise during a lethal blizzard? Our guests will arrive tomorrow, Victor continued. They will observe how we weather this trial, how we emerge stronger. Operation Red Moon proceeds as planned, regardless of the storm. In fact, the storm provides the perfect cover for the first phase. Reiner's voice followed, low but audible. Are you certain, Alpha? If the storm is truly as severe as predicted, even the strongest among us will be challenged. The strong adapt and survive, Victor replied. The weak perish. This has always been the natural order, the truth our ancestors understood before weakness was tolerated in the name of compassion. A new voice spoke, one Serena didn't recognize, deep, with an accent she couldn't place. The old ways must be restored if our kind is to survive the coming changes. Operation Red Moon is just the beginning. The Crimson Pack stands ready to support your vision, Alpha Victor. Crimson Pack? Serena had never heard of such a group, and her knowledge of pack politics was extensive, despite her exclusion from official channels. The name carried ominous overtones, particularly in conjunction with this mysterious operation. Then we are agreed, Victor declared. Final preparations will be completed by tomorrow evening. When our guests arrive, they will witness a pack united in purpose and vision. The meeting continued with logistics and assignments, but Serena's mind was racing with the implications of what she'd overheard. Something was happening, something beyond preparation for a storm. Victor was planning something that coincided with the blizzard, something that involved outsiders, and this Operation Red Moon. As the meeting concluded and wolves began to disperse, Serena slipped away from her listening post, moving silently through the shadows back toward her cabin. The first heavy snowflakes had begun to fall, catching in her hair and on her eyelashes as she walked. In the distance, she spotted an unfamiliar vehicle approaching the pack house, a black SUV with tinted windows, moving with deliberate slowness along the snow-dusted road. Serena ducked behind a large pine, watching as the vehicle stopped before the main entrance. The driver remained inside, but the passenger door opened, The figure that emerged stood tall, easily matching Reiner in height, but with a leaner build that suggested speed rather than brute strength. Even at this distance, Serena could see the distinctive silver gray of his hair, unusual for a wolf who appeared to be in his prime. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, surveying the pack house with calculating eyes that seemed to glow red in the reflection of the car's taillights. Victor emerged to greet the stranger, clasping forearms in the traditional gesture between alphas. Their conversation was too distant to overhear, but the body language spoke of familiarity and shared purpose. The stranger handed Victor something small enough to be concealed in his palm, then gestured toward the sky, where snow was now falling in earnest. The exchange was brief. The silver-haired stranger returned to the vehicle, which then continued up the road toward the guest cabins situated on the northern edge of the property. Victor remained on the porch, examining whatever he had been given, his expression unreadable from Serena's vantage point. Instinct warned her to retreat before she was discovered. Gathering her jacket more tightly around her shoulders, Serena made her way back to her cabin, each step accompanied by the soft crunch of fresh snow. The temperature had dropped noticeably since nightfall, the leading edge of the coming storm making itself felt. Inside her small dwelling, Serena immediately went to work. If she was to survive what was coming, both the natural threat and whatever Victor was planning, she needed to prepare. She gathered her herbs, organizing them by purpose and potency. Medical supplies were checked and packed in a way that would allow for quick retrieval. Food stores, meager though they were consolidated and inventoried. Last, she retrieved the silver dagger and her mother's journal from their hiding place. The weapon she secured in a sheath at her ankle, concealed beneath her pant leg. The journal she studied by candlelight, searching for any information that might prove useful in the days ahead. One entry caught her attention, written in her mother's hand, but referencing an older source. It described a ritual used by ancient packs during times of great crisis, a bonding of wolves across rank and bloodline that allowed for sharing of strength and abilities. Such bonds were temporary but powerful, creating connections that transcended the normal pack hierarchy. The ritual had been forbidden by the modern pack structure, deemed too dangerous because it undermined the rigid alpha-beta-omega system that kept power concentrated at the top. According to the journal, the ritual had once been common practice, allowing packs to survive catastrophes by temporarily elevating the unique abilities of each member, regardless of rank. Serena committed the details to memory, not knowing if such knowledge would ever be useful, but unwilling to overlook any potential advantage. As she closed the journal, a violent gust of wind rattled her cabin's thin walls, a harbinger of the fury to come. The next day dawned in twilight, the heavy storm clouds blocking most of the sun's light. Snow fell steadily, already accumulating to impressive depths around Serena's cabin. The wind came in powerful gusts that threatened to tear the roof from its moorings, finding every crack and gap in the structure's inadequate construction. Serena worked methodically to reinforce her shelter, stuffing rags into the largest gaps and positioning her few pieces of furniture to brace the walls where they seemed weakest. It was futile work, ultimately. The cabin had not been built to withstand a storm of this magnitude, but it was all she had, and she would fight to protect it as long as possible. By midday, the storm's intensity had doubled. Snow fell so heavily that visibility was reduced to mere feet. The wind howled like a living thing, angry and relentless. Inside her cabin, Serena huddled near her small wood stove, rationing her fuel to ensure it would last as long as possible. The temperature outside had plummeted to deadly levels. Even a werewolf's naturally higher body temperature would not be sufficient protection against such cold for more than minutes. As darkness fell, the storm reached new heights of fury. The cabin shuddered continuously under the assault, the walls creaking in protest. Serena had just added another precious log to her fire when she heard it. A sound beneath the howling wind, barely audible but distinct to her sensitive hearing, scratching, weak and desperate, at her door. Instinct told her to ignore it. Opening the door meant losing precious heat, meant exposure to the killing cold, meant risking her own survival for what might be nothing more than debris blown against the cabin by the wind. But something deeper than instinct, Something tied to her very essence as a healer drove her to her feet. The scratching came again, weaker this time, accompanied by a whimper that was definitely not the wind. Serena moved to the door, her decision already made despite the rational arguments against it. She pulled it open just enough to peer outside. The storm exploded into her cabin with physical force, snow and wind blasting her face, momentarily blinding her. But there, on her threshold, half buried in a snowdrift, was a wolf. Gray and white, medium-sized, its fur crusted with ice. Amber eyes met hers with desperate intelligence before closing weakly. Serena acted without hesitation, grabbing the wolf beneath its front legs and pulling with all her strength. The animal was dead weight, far heavier than its size suggested, and Serena's muscles screamed with the effort of dragging it over her threshold. But she managed, her determination lending her strength beyond her small frame. As she turned to close the door against the howling storm, she saw them, eyes gleaming in the darkness beyond her doorway, multiple pairs, a dozen or more, all reflecting the faint light from her cabin. They emerged from the white curtain of the blizzard like apparitions, wolves of various colors and sizes, all covered in ice, all barely able to stand. For a heartbeat, Serena hesitated. Her cabin was tiny, barely large enough for her alone. The heat from her small fire would be quickly overwhelmed by so many frozen bodies. Her supplies, already meager, would be exhausted in hours rather than days. But as one of the wolves collapsed in her doorway, a large brown male whose labored breathing spoke of imminent death, the decision made itself. She couldn't turn them away, couldn't close the door and listen as they died mere feet from her shelter. Whatever the cost to herself, she would try to save them. "Come," she called, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "Inside, quickly!" She grabbed the fallen brown wolf, straining to pull its massive form across the threshold. One by one, the wolves stumbled into her cabin, collapsing on her floor, her bed against her walls. Serena counted them as they entered. 5, 8, 12, 15 wolves now packed into a space meant for one, their frozen bodies radiating cold instead of warmth. The last to enter was a black wolf so large it seemed impossible he had managed to stay on his feet. His fur was darkest midnight with threads of silver running through it, his paws massive with claws like daggers. But it was his eyes that seized Serena's attention. Gold, pure metallic gold, unlike any wolf eyes she had ever seen. They fixed on her with an intensity that pierced through the haze of cold and exhaustion, seeing her, recognizing something in her that she herself didn't fully understand. Then he too collapsed, his great body folding like a felled tree. Serena barely managed to close the door against the storm before turning to assess the disaster she'd invited into her home. 15 wolves, all near death from cold, all needing immediate care if they were to survive. She moved instinctively into healer mode, prioritizing those in most critical condition. The small gray female whose breathing came in short, painful gasps. The young tan male whose ear tips and paws showed signs of frostbite. And the great black wolf, whose condition seemed worst of all despite his impressive size. As she examined him more closely, Serena noticed something alarming. Beneath the ice crusting his fur, where the black hair parted to reveal skin, she saw telltale silver-gray lines spreading like veins gone wrong, silver poisoning, and advanced at that. This wolf had been exposed to pure silver recently, and in significant amounts. It was a miracle he still lived. Serena's mind raced. Silver poisoning was typically a death sentence for werewolves, but her mother's journal had contained treatments, remedies forgotten or forbidden by modern packs. Working quickly, she retrieved the hidden book and turned to the relevant pages. The ingredients required were rare, but she had most of them in her stores. Winter root, which she had gathered just yesterday. Blood moss, which grew only in the deepest parts of the forest, but which she cultivated in small amounts in pots by her window. Silverhawk feather, the rarest component, which her mother had stored in a sealed glass vial. She worked with desperate speed, combining ingredients according to the ancient instructions, heating them over her fire until they formed a thick, silvery paste that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The concoction smelled bitter and metallic, but according to the journal, it would draw out silver toxicity if applied directly to the affected areas. Kneeling beside the black wolf, Serena began to apply the paste along the silver lines spreading across his skin. The effect was immediate and startling. Where the paste touched, the discolored veins began to recede, the sickly gray giving way to natural skin tone. The wolf's breathing, which had been shallow and labored, deepened and steadied. Those gold eyes opened again, fixing on her face with that same piercing intensity. They held recognition, surprise, and something else. Something that looked remarkably like hope. For hours, Serena worked tirelessly. She arranged the wolves in a semicircle around her small fire, positioning them so that the weakest were closest to the heat source. She melted snow in her cooking pot, using the warm water to help raise their core temperatures and to clean the worst of the ice from their fur. She applied salves to frostbitten paws and ears, wrapped her few blankets around the smallest and weakest among them. The storm outside reached a crescendo of violence, the wind screaming against the cabin walls, the structure groaning under the weight of accumulated snow. But inside, a different kind of magic was taking place. 15 wolves, saved from certain death, slowly returning to life under the care of an Omega they'd never met. As dawn approached, though no sunlight penetrated the ongoing storm, Serena finally allowed herself to rest. She sat against the wall near the fire, her own body shaking with exhaustion. Her clothes were soaked with melted snow and sweat from her exertions. Her hands were raw and blistered from constantly stoking the fire. But the wolves were alive, all 15, breathing, warming, recovering. The black wolf with the gold eyes opened them once more, and this time he kept them open. He regarded her steadily across the small space, something ancient and knowing, swirling in those unusual irises. Then, with effort that spoke of tremendous willpower overcoming physical limitation, he rose to his feet. The transformation that followed stole Serena's breath. One moment, a massive black wolf stood before her. The next, a man knelt on her cabin floor. And not just any man. He was magnificent in a way that defied simple description. Tall and powerfully built, with skin the color of burnished copper and hair as black as his wolf's fur, falling past his shoulders in a wild mane threaded with silver. But it was his eyes, still that impossible gold, that held her captive. He wore no clothing, his magnificent form bare to her gaze, covered in scars that spoke of countless battles survived. Most striking was a jagged mark across his chest, directly over his heart, silver gray in color and shaped almost like a crown. "You," he said, his voice deep and rough, carrying the weight of command even in a single word. "You saved us." Serena found herself unable to look away from those gold eyes, unable even to summon the customary submissive posture an Omega should adopt in the presence of such obvious alpha power. "You needed help. I couldn't let you die." "Do you know what we are?" he asked, studying her with that same intense focus. "Werewolves," Serena answered simply. "Like me." A smile curved his lips, transforming his face from merely handsome to devastating. "Not just werewolves. I am Magnus Shadowfang, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, Lord of the Five Kingdoms, Commander of the Nightshade Guard." The titles meant nothing to Serena, isolated as she had been from the wider world of pack politics. But the sheer power radiating from him told her this was no ordinary alpha. Around them, the other wolves began to shift as well, transforming from animals to men and women of various ages and appearances. All of them, Serena noticed, bore the same silver-gray mark somewhere on their bodies, though none as prominent as the one on Magnus's chest. "My royal guard," Magnus explained, gesturing to the others, "the most elite warriors in the kingdom. And you saved us all." A tall woman with auburn hair and sharp green eyes stepped forward, her nude form displaying the confident poise of a warrior unconcerned with modesty. "Your Majesty, we need to assess our situation. The storm, our location, the silver poisoning. The silver poisoning, Magnus repeated, his golden gaze returning to Serena. You treated it. How? That knowledge has been lost for generations. Serena hesitated, aware that she had revealed a secret that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. But something in those gold eyes compelled truth. My mother's journal. She was a healer who preserved old knowledge. The treatments for silver poisoning were forbidden, but not forgotten. Forbidden by those who feared what it might mean, Magnus said softly. If silver can be countered, the entire power structure of modern pacts is built on a lie. Before Serena could respond, a tremendous crack split the air. Everyone froze. The brown wolf, who had shifted into a mountain of a man with dark skin and eyes like chips of onyx, pointed toward the ceiling. The roof. The weight of the snow. As if his words were prophecy, the cabin's roof began to groan ominously, the center beam visibly bending under a weight it had never been designed to bear. Small cascades of snow began to filter through widening cracks in the structure. "Everyone out!" Magnus commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Now!" Chaos erupted as 15 naked werewolves scrambled for the door. Serena stood frozen, watching as her home, humble though it was, began to collapse around her. Everything she owned was here. Her mother's journal, her herbs, her few precious mementos. Strong hands gripped her waist, lifting her bodily from the floor. Magnus had her pressed against his chest, moving toward the door, even as another crack signaled the imminent failure of the roof. "Move, damn it!" The world became confusion and noise. Wolves scrambled through the snow, their naked human forms immediately assaulted by the lethal cold. The brown giant literally held the doorframe, his massive body braced against it to keep it open as everyone poured through. Magnus carried Serena into the storm, her small form clutched protectively against his chest. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing breath, burning exposed skin. Visibility was near zero, the world reduced to a howling white void. "The trees!" the auburn-haired woman shouted, pointing toward a dark line barely visible through the snow. "We need cover!" They ran, 15 werewolves fleeing into a storm that wanted them dead. Serena buried her face against Magnus's chest, her thin shirt no protection against the cold. His body heat was the only thing keeping her from freezing instantly. Behind them, the cabin collapsed with a sound like the world ending. 14 years of Serena's life, gone in an instant. Her home, her possessions, all destroyed in seconds. "Don't look back," Magnus commanded, his voice rough against her ear. "Keep moving. We're not dying today." The forest rose up before them like salvation, massive pines with branches heavy with snow, creating pockets of relative shelter. The wolves converged on a hollow, where several fallen trees had created a natural windbreak. It wasn't much, barely anything, but it was better than the open storm. Magnus set Serena down carefully in the center of the hollow, immediately positioning himself between her and the worst of the wind. The others formed a circle around them, creating a living windbreak with their bodies. "Everyone shift," the brown giant commanded. "Fur is better insulation than skin." One by one, humans became wolves again, powerful creatures designed for survival in harsh climates. They arranged themselves with military precision, the largest on the outside facing the wind, smaller ones toward the center, where Serena huddled. Magnus was the last to shift. He held her gaze for a long moment, something unreadable in those golden eyes. Then he changed, and the massive black wolf stood before her once more. He lay down directly against her, his body a wall of warmth. The other wolves closed in, forming layers of fur and heat around her. It should have been terrifying, should have been suffocating. 15 massive predators pinning her down, their weight enormous, their teeth inches from her skin. Instead, it was the safest Serena had ever felt. As the wolves' body heat began to accumulate in their makeshift den, creating a pocket of warm air, Serena felt tears burn her eyes. She had lost everything: her home, her possessions, her mother's precious journal. Yet here, surrounded by strangers, she felt a connection she had never experienced with her own pack. The black wolf made a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, but something gentler, comforting. His massive head turned, and he nuzzled her face with his muzzle. "Rest," a voice said in her mind, deep and unmistakably Magnus's. "You've done enough, brave Omega. Let us protect you for a while." "How?" Serena's shock manifested as a question pushed through their mental connection. "Alpha privilege," he replied, amusement coloring his mental tone. "I can speak mind to mind with wolves in my presence. Now sleep. You're exhausted and we have a long wait ahead. The storm will end when it ends. We'll survive it together. I promise." Serena wanted to argue, wanted to stay vigilant, to watch for dangers, to keep herself separate and safe as she'd learned to do. But she was exhausted, bone-deep tired, and for the first time in years, she felt safe enough to truly rest. So she closed her eyes and let darkness claim her. She woke to strange stillness. The wind had stopped. The constant background noise of the storm had ceased. The world beyond their den of wolves was quiet in a way that felt almost unnatural after days of chaos. Serena stirred and immediately felt the wolves around her shift to accommodate her movement. They'd stayed in wolf form, maintained their protective circle around her throughout the night. "The storm's over," she whispered. Magnus lifted his head, ears swiveling as he assessed. Then he carefully extracted himself from the pile and padded to the edge of their shelter. He looked out, surveyed their surroundings, then shifted back to human form. "The worst has passed," he confirmed, his nude form seemingly impervious to the cold now that the lethal wind had died. "But we're not safe yet." One by one, the other wolves shifted and emerged from their den. Serena followed, her muscles stiff and aching from a night curled in an awkward position. What she saw took her breath away. The forest was transformed. Snow had piled in drifts taller than her head. Trees had been snapped like twigs by the wind. And in the distance, where her cabin should have been, there was only a mound of white, completely buried, completely destroyed. "I'm sorry," the small blonde woman who had been the gray wolf said softly, appearing at Serena's side. "It wasn't much, but it was yours." "It was all I had," Serena corrected, her voice hollow. "Everything." A shadow fell across the snow before her. Magnus stood there, his powerful form blocking the weak sunlight that had begun to filter through the dispersing clouds. His expression was solemn, but his eyes held warmth as they studied her face. "Not everything," he said quietly. "You have us now, and we have a debt that can never be fully repaid." Before Serena could respond, the auburn-haired woman called out in warning, "Movement! 11 o'clock!" Everyone tensed, the guards moving instinctively into defensive positions around Magnus and Serena. Through the trees, dark shapes approached. Not wolves, not quite. They moved like wolves, but were wrong somehow, their proportions distorted, their eyes glowing an unnatural red in the bright reflection off the snow. "Red eyes," Magnus growled, the sound filled with hatred. "They found us." The first creature burst into their clearing, a nightmare version of a wolf with elongated limbs and exposed teeth that seemed too numerous for its misshapen jaw. Behind it came more, 5, 8, a dozen of the twisted things, all focused on the small group with predatory intent. "Shift!" Magnus commanded. "Protect the Omega!" The transformation rippled through the group, wolves replacing humans in an instant. But Serena remained in human form, suddenly small and vulnerable amid the chaos that erupted as the creatures attacked. The battle was swift and violent. Magnus's guard fought with coordinated precision, taking down the twisted wolves with practiced efficiency. But they were outnumbered, and the Red Eyes fought with unnatural strength and savagery. Serena found herself cornered by one of the creatures, its red gaze fixed on her with malevolent hunger. It advanced slowly, savoring her fear, its distorted muzzle pulled back in a grotesque parody of a grin. In that moment of extremity, Serena remembered the silver dagger still strapped to her ankle. She pulled it free, the blade gleaming in the winter light. The creature hesitated, its red eyes fixed on the silver, with what looked remarkably like fear. It lunged. Serena moved with instinct born of desperation, the dagger flashing in an arc that caught the creature across its exposed throat. Silver met flesh with a sound like sizzling meat. The creature shrieked, a sound no natural wolf could make, as silver-gray lines spread rapidly from the wound, turning its twisted form to ash in seconds. Silence fell over the clearing as the last of the red eyes fell. The royal guard stood panting, some bearing wounds that bled freely onto the snow. Magnus shifted back to human form, his golden eyes wide as they fixed on Serena and the silver dagger she still held. "You wield pure silver," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "That's impossible." Serena looked down at the weapon in her hand, still clean despite having just taken a life. No blood stained its gleaming surface. "My father's," she explained. "Morris said it had been in my family for generations, that the Moonshade bloodline could handle silver without harm." "Moonshade," Magnus repeated, the name clearly significant to him. "You're a Moonshade?" Serena nodded, uncertain why her family name should mean anything to this Alpha King. "Serena Moonshade, does that matter?" Instead of answering, Magnus approached her slowly, his golden eyes never leaving hers. When he stood before her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, he spoke in a voice meant only for her. "The Moonshades were guardians in the old times, keepers of balance, protectors against corruption." His hand reached out, hovering just above the silver dagger but not touching it. "They were thought extinct 3 generations ago, hunted to near annihilation by those who feared their power." "Power? I'm an Omega, the lowest rank." Magnus's laugh held no humor. "Rank is an invention of those who feared true power. The Moonshades were never Alpha or Beta or Omega. They were balance incarnate, the center around which the wheel of power turned." Around them, the guards had begun to tend to their wounded, but all were clearly listening to this exchange with intense interest. The auburn-haired woman approached, her expression grave. "Your Majesty, if she truly is a Moonshade, then the prophecy—" "Not now, Valencia," Magnus cut her off, his gaze still fixed on Serena. "We need shelter. The Red Eyes will have reported our location. More will come, and soon." "The nearest outpost is 2 days' journey northeast," the brown giant said, now back in human form and examining a deep gash in his forearm. "Ravengard Fortress. Can you make it, Your Majesty?" Magnus's hand went unconsciously to the silver mark on his chest. "The poison is spreading again. The temporary treatment bought time, but without the full remedy." He left the implication hanging. All eyes turned to Serena. "I don't have the journal anymore," she said, regret cutting deep. "It was in the cabin when it collapsed. All my mother's knowledge, lost." "Not all," Magnus said softly. "You carry it in your mind, in your blood. The Moonshade gift isn't in a book, it's in you." Serena shook her head. "I only know fragments, basic treatments, emergency care. The silver antidote was complex. I followed the recipe exactly because I had to." "Then we need another solution," the blonde woman said. "The Omega can't travel at our pace, especially not through snow this deep. And you need treatment, Your Majesty, or the silver will reach your heart within days." Magnus was silent for a long moment, his golden eyes never leaving Serena's face. Then he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of decision. "There is a way, an old way, forbidden in modern times, but it would solve both problems." "The pack bond," Valencia said, her tone making it clear this was not a solution she favored. "Your Majesty, in your condition, creating a bond could accelerate the spread of the poison." "Or it could save my life," Magnus countered. "The Moonshade blood might neutralize the silver through the bond." "Or kill you both." Valencia's control slipped, real fear showing through her warrior facade. "This isn't just any Omega. She's a Moonshade. Their power is unpredictable, especially when bonded to an alpha of your strength." Magnus turned to Serena, his expression solemn. "The choice must be yours. A temporary pack bond would link you to us, to me specifically. It would give you access to alpha strength and speed, allow you to keep pace with us in wolf form, but it would also connect you to me in ways that are intimate. You would feel my emotions, my pain, and I would feel yours." "And the silver poisoning?" Serena asked, already knowing the answer. "The bond might accelerate it, or your blood might neutralize it. There's no way to know until it's done." Serena looked around at the 15 strangers who had transformed her life in the span of a day, at the destroyed cabin that had been her prison and her sanctuary, at the silver dagger in her hand, a legacy she was only beginning to understand. "If we don't do this, you die," she said simply, "and I'm left alone in wilderness I barely know, with these red-eye creatures hunting me." Magnus nodded. "Those are the stakes. Then there's no choice at all." Serena straightened, meeting his golden gaze without flinching. "I accept the bond. Whatever comes, we face it together." A smile curved Magnus's lips, transforming his solemn face. Spoken like a true moonshade. He extended his hands, palms up, an invitation rather than a command. "Come, let us begin." The world shifted around Serena as Magnus's hands clasped hers. The ancient ritual of pack bonding required no elaborate preparation, no mystical ingredients, only will and blood and the primal connection that existed between all werewolves. Magnus stood before her, his golden eyes luminous in the winter light, his powerful form still nude and seemingly impervious to the cold. "Serena Moonshade," he began, his voice taking on a formal cadence that resonated through her bones. "Do you willingly accept this bond? Do you offer your strength to our cause, your heart to our protection, your blood to our blood?" The words felt heavy with power, with meaning beyond their surface. This wasn't just about survival. It was about choice, about belonging, about stepping into a destiny she hadn't known awaited her. "I do," she answered, the words emerging as a whisper yet carrying the weight of oath. "Do you swear to honor the pack, to stand with us in darkness and light, to share in our burdens as we share in yours?" "I do." Magnus's grip tightened on her hands. "Then by the power of the ancient laws, by the blood of my ancestors, I claim you as pack. I offer you my strength, my protection, my loyalty. What threatens you threatens me. What hurts you hurts me. We are bound from this moment until death or choice parts us." The last word barely left his lips before the world exploded in sensation. Power slammed into Serena like a physical blow. Not her power, but his. Alpha strength, raw and overwhelming, pouring into her system through their joined hands. She gasped, her knees buckling, but Magnus held her upright, his eyes now blazing pure gold with no white visible. "Don't fight it," he commanded, his voice resonating with alpha authority. "Let it in. Let it change you." Serena had no choice. The power flooded through her veins like liquid fire, burning away everything weak, everything broken. Her wolf, always small and submissive, suddenly roared to life, growing, strengthening, fed by alpha magic, until she was no longer a frightened shadow, but something magnificent. She felt the others too, 15 distinct presences blooming in her mind like stars appearing at twilight. Valencia's sharp intelligence, the brown giant's steady strength, the blonde woman's gentle warmth. Each member of the Royal Guard became a point of light in her consciousness, connected by threads of pack bond. And at the center of it all was Magnus, blazing like the sun. His presence in her mind was enormous, overwhelming, all-consuming. She felt his power, but also his emotions, his fierce protectiveness, his unexpected tenderness, and something darker. Pain. The silver poisoning was spreading, accelerated by the magical exertion of creating the bond. "Stay with me." Magnus's voice, both aloud and in her mind. "You can handle this." "The poison," she gasped. "It's spreading faster." "Focus on the bond," he urged. "Your blood, Serena. The Moonshade gift. Let it flow through the connection." Instinctively, she understood. The bond wasn't just one way, power flowing from Alpha to Omega. It was reciprocal. Her heritage, The inexplicable ability to handle silver without harm could flow back to him through the same channel. Serena concentrated, visualizing her immunity spreading through the bond, seeking out the silver poison in Magnus's system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she felt it, the poison recoiling from her blood's touch, retreating like darkness before dawn. As the transformation completed, the fire in her veins began to cool, settling into a steady warmth. The presences in her mind shifted from overwhelming to comfortable, and her wolf stood tall and proud for the first time in her life. Serena opened eyes she didn't remember closing. Magnus was smiling at her, his own eyes back to their normal gold, though pain still lingered in their depths. "Welcome to the pack, Serena Moonshade." The bond settled like a warm cloak around her mind, connecting her to each of the royal guards in ways both strange and wonderful. Most surprising was the sense of acceptance flowing through those connections, not grudging tolerance, but genuine welcome. "Try to shift," the blonde woman suggested. She had introduced herself as Alara, the pack's healer and tracker. "The bond should make it easier now." Serena had always dreaded shifting. For most werewolves, the transformation was natural, even pleasurable. For her, it had been painful and difficult, her wolf form smaller and weaker than even other omegas. But now, with the bond humming in her veins, she reached for her wolf without fear. The shift happened in a heartbeat. Bones rearranged, fur sprouted, senses sharpened. One moment she was human, the next she stood on 4 legs, her perspective closer to the ground. But this wasn't her old wolf. This wasn't the small, frightened creature that had been mocked by her former pack. This wolf was bigger, stronger. Her fur was the color of moonlight, silver white with hints of pale gold. Her senses were sharper, colors more vivid, scents more complex. When she looked up at Magnus, now shifted into his massive black form, she saw approval in his golden gaze. "Magnificent," his voice whispered through the pack link. The brown giant, whose name was Alaric, circled her once, his own wolf form towering above even the other guards. "She's a true Moonshade wolf," his voice rumbled through the mental connection. "Look at the silver markings around her eyes." Serena couldn't see herself, but she felt the change, the power that now coursed through her body. The bond pulsed in her chest, feeding her strength, stabilizing her form. "Can you run?" Magnus asked through the link. "We need to move before more red eyes find us." In answer, Serena broke into a sprint, surprised by the power in her new legs, the ease with which she moved through the deep snow. The others followed, forming a protective formation around her and Magnus. They ran through the winter wilderness, the snow-covered landscape flowing past in a blur of white and shadow. Serena kept pace effortlessly, drawing on the bond for strength when needed. What should have been exhausting felt exhilarating instead, her wolf reveling in this newfound freedom. Through the bond, she sensed Magnus's condition. The silver poisoning had stabilized, but not retreated. Her blood was holding it at bay, but the effort was draining her. They needed to reach this Ravengard fortress, needed the resources to create a proper cure. They traveled until nightfall, stopping only when darkness made navigation treacherous, even for werewolf eyes. The guards established a perimeter around a sheltered hollow, 2 always remaining in wolf form to stand watch while the others shifted to rest more comfortably. Serena shifted back to human form, the transformation now as easy as breathing. Her clothes had been lost in the chaos of the cabin collapse, but one of the guards produced a spare tunic from a waterproof pack they'd managed to salvage. It hung to her knees, offering modest coverage despite being clearly designed for someone much larger. Magnus approached, now in human form as well, a blanket wrapped around his waist. His face showed strain, the silver mark on his chest noticeably larger than before. "You should rest," Serena told him, her healer's instincts assessing his condition. "The poison is contained, but not neutralized." "There's no time for rest," he replied, though he sat heavily on a fallen log. "The red eyes will report back. Victor will know we survived." "Victor?" The name sent a chill through Serena that had nothing to do with the winter air. "My former alpha?" Magnus nodded grimly. "Not just your alpha. He's a key figure in what we call the Red Moon Society, a group dedicated to restoring the natural order as they see it. They believe Omegas should be slaves, Betas servants, and Alphas absolute rulers with no checks on their power. But what does that have to do with you, with these red eyes? I've spent the last 5 years dismantling the old hierarchy, establishing laws that protect all ranks, creating pathways for advancement based on merit rather than birth status. Pride and conviction colored his voice. The Red Moon Society sees this as an abomination, a violation of wolf nature. They've been working to undermine me, to weaken the royal bloodline. The silver poisoning, Serena realized. They did this to you. A trap meant to kill, not just injure. If you hadn't found us when you did, if you hadn't known the treatment. He left the implication hanging. But why were you in Ironwood territory at all, so far from your kingdom? Magnus exchanged a look with Valencia, who had approached silently during their conversation. After a moment's hesitation, he continued. We received intelligence about Operation Red Moon, a coordinated attempt to overthrow the monarchy, beginning with my assassination. The storm provided cover for us to investigate discreetly. And instead, you nearly died in it, Serena observed. The intelligence was a trap. They knew we were coming. The silver was embedded in the forest paths, impossible to detect until too late. We were ambushed, forced to flee in wolf form, and then the storm hit. Valencia interjected, her voice hard with controlled anger. They meant for the storm to finish what the silver began. No one would question a king and his guard perishing in a blizzard of historic proportions. But you survived, Serena said, thanks to an Omega they'd written off as worthless. Magnus's laugh held no humor. The irony isn't lost on me. The very wolf they discarded saved the king they sought to destroy. His golden eyes fixed on her with that now familiar intensity. But they'll try again, and when we reach Ravengard, the true battle begins. The journey resumed at first light, the pack moving with renewed urgency through the snow-covered landscape. Through the bond, Serena sensed their collective determination, their unwavering loyalty to their king, their growing protectiveness toward her. Most surprising was the sense of purpose that now filled her. After years of mere survival, of existing on the margins, she had found something worth fighting for, not just her own life, but a future where no wolf was deemed worthless based on rank alone. By midday, the distant outline of Ravengard Fortress appeared on the horizon. Even from miles away, the structure was impressive. A massive stone edifice built into the side of a mountain, its towers and battlements clearly designed for defense rather than beauty. As they drew closer, Serena noted the guards patrolling the walls, their forms alert and watchful. When they spotted the approaching wolves, alarms sounded, clear and urgent in the winter air. "They don't recognize us," Alara explained through the pack link. "Stay close." The formation tightened around Serena and Magnus as they approached the main gates. A voice called down from the battlements, authoritative and suspicious. "Identify yourselves!" Magnus shifted to human form, standing proud and unashamed of his nudity in the snow. "Commander Maximus, open your gates for your king!" Stunned silence followed, then a flurry of activity. The massive gates swung inward with a groan of ancient hinges. Soldiers poured out, forming an honor guard on either side of the entrance, each dropping to one knee as Magnus approached. The commander himself descended from the wall, a tall man with iron-gray hair and the bearing of one who had seen too many battles to be easily impressed. His face registered shock, followed quickly by relief as he recognized his king. "Your Majesty," he said, dropping to one knee. "We received word you were lost in the storm." "Nearly so," Magnus acknowledged. "Rise, old friend. We need shelter, clothing, and most urgently, a healer familiar with silver poisoning." Maximus rose, his sharp eyes taking in Magnus's condition, then the wolves behind him, lingering longest on Serena's unusual silver-white form. "Silver poisoning? But how—" "Treachery and ambush," Magnus answered tersely. "Explanations can wait. The cold does not." Maximus nodded briskly, all business now. "Of course, Your Majesty. Follow me." The interior of Ravengard Fortress was a stark contrast to the brutal winter landscape outside. Massive fireplaces roared in every chamber, casting warm light on stone walls hung with tapestries depicting ancient battles. Soldiers and servants moved with disciplined efficiency, preparing rooms, gathering clothing and supplies, their faces showing both surprise and relief at their king's unexpected arrival. Serena shifted back to human form once inside, grateful for the tunic that provided at least minimal coverage. The guards did likewise, accepting clothing from the fortress staff with murmured thanks. She followed Magnus and the others to a large chamber dominated by a circular table clearly designed for war councils and strategy sessions. Maps covered the walls, detailed renderings of territories and borders, supply routes, and defensive positions. "The Silver Wolf," Magnus said suddenly, looking past Serena toward the chamber's entrance. Serena turned to see a woman standing in the doorway, her presence commanding immediate attention. She was tall and powerfully built, with a warrior's stance and watchful eyes. Most striking was her hair, silver gray despite a face that suggested she was no more than 40, falling in a thick braid over one shoulder. "My king," the woman said, her voice rich and resonant. "The rumors of your death were, I see, greatly exaggerated." "Catherine," Magnus greeted her with genuine warmth. "Still guarding the northern borders like a vengeful spirit?" "Someone must," she replied with a half-smile, approaching the table. Her gaze fell on Serena, sharpening with sudden interest. "And who is this? I sense something familiar." "Serena Moonshade," Magnus introduced her. "Last of her bloodline, and newest member of the royal pack." Catherine's composure visibly faltered. "Moonshade? But they were exterminated generations ago. The Purge—" "Not all, apparently," Magnus said. "She bears the gift. She can wield silver without harm." Catherine circled Serena slowly, her expression intense and evaluating. "Show me," she demanded. Serena hesitated, looking to Magnus, who nodded encouragement. From her ankle sheath, she drew the silver dagger, holding it comfortably in her palm where any other werewolf would have suffered immediate burns. Catherine's breath caught. "The ancient blade," she whispered. "Moonfire. I thought it lost forever." She looked up from the dagger to Serena's face, her eyes bright with what looked remarkably like hope. "Do you know what you are, child?" "An Omega," Serena answered automatically. Catherine laughed, the sound surprisingly musical for such a formidable woman. "An Omega? Is that what they told you?" She shook her head in apparent disgust. The arrogance of modern packs, reducing everything to their artificial hierarchy. She moved to one of the maps on the wall, pulling it aside to reveal an older document beneath. This was no ordinary map, but a complex diagram, circles within circles, ancient symbols arranged in patterns that seemed to shift as Serena looked at them. Before the Great Division, before Alphas seized power and rewrote our history, there were the 3 paths, Catherine explained, her finger tracing the outermost circle. The path of strength, the path of cunning, and the path of balance. Her finger moved inward. Those who followed strength became what you know as alphas. Those who followed cunning became betas. And those who followed balance became what modern packs ignorantly call omegas. "But omegas are the weakest rank," Serena said, repeating what she'd been told her entire life. "Weak?" Catherine's laugh held no humor this time. "Is balance weak? Is harmony powerless? The balanced ones were healers, yes, but also judges, peacekeepers, and when necessary, executioners. They could handle silver because they embodied both halves of our nature, human reason and wolf instinct in perfect equilibrium." She pointed to the dagger in Serena's hand. "That weapon has been passed down through your bloodline for 15 generations. It was forged to protect, to maintain balance when power corrupted. The Moonshades were the greatest of the balanced ones, guardians against the very tyranny the Red Moon Society now seeks to restore." The revelation settled over Serena like a physical weight. Everything she had believed about herself, everything she had been told about her nature and her place in the world, was a lie constructed to keep her submissive and isolated. "The silver poisoning," she said suddenly, remembering the immediate crisis. "Magnus needs treatment. The bond is helping, but it's not enough." Catherine nodded briskly, switching from historian to commander in an instant. "Maximus, send for the archives, the old texts on metallurgical alchemy." To Serena she added, "If a cure exists, it will be in the ancient records. This fortress houses the oldest library in the 5 kingdoms." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Serena was given proper clothing, simple but well-made garments that actually fit her small frame. Food was provided, hearty fare designed to restore strength after days of privation. Most importantly, she was granted access to the fortress archives, a vast repository of knowledge stored in a chamber deep within the mountain. Catherine joined her there, bringing ancient texts bound in materials Serena couldn't identify. Together they searched for information on silver poisoning, treatments more permanent than the temporary solutions Serena had administered in her cabin. "Here," Catherine said finally, her finger tracing lines of script in a language Serena couldn't read. "The silver heart ritual. It can purge metal toxicity from the blood, but—" She frowned, continuing to read. "It requires rare components, and the caster must have Moonshade blood." "What components?" Serena asked, already mentally cataloging the herbs and minerals she knew. "Moonstone dust, wolfsbane pollen harvested under a full moon, silver ash from a ritual fire, and blood freely given from a wolf of each path, strength, cunning, and balance." Serena considered this. "I have the blood of balance. Magnus has the blood of strength. Any of the guards could provide the blood of cunning." Catherine nodded. "Ravengard's stores include moonstones and wolfsbane. The silver ash is more problematic. It must come from silver that has taken a life, purified by ritual fire." Serena thought of the red eye she had killed with her father's dagger. Would silver that destroyed one of those twisted wolves work? Catherine's eyes widened. "You encountered the corrupted and survived? With Moonfire's blade?" At Serena's nod, she continued, "Yes, that would be ideal, in fact. The ritual essentially redirects the silver's destructive properties, turning them against the poison rather than the host." "Then we can save him," Serena said, relief flooding through her. "It won't be simple," Catherine cautioned. "The ritual is complex, and even with your bloodline, there's risk. The poison has reached his heart. Extracting it could kill him if done improperly." "I have to try," Serena insisted. "He saved me as much as I saved him, and through the bond, I can feel his pain growing." Catherine studied her with those penetrating eyes. "The bond complicates things. If he dies during the ritual, the backlash could kill you too. Are you willing to risk that?" Serena didn't hesitate. "Yes." A smile touched Catherine's lips. "Then let's prepare. But first, there's something else you should see." She led Serena deeper into the archives, to a section where the air felt older somehow, heavy with secrets long kept. From a locked cabinet, she removed a scroll case made of dark wood inlaid with silver wire in patterns similar to those on Serena's mother's journal. "This," Catherine said, carefully unrolling the ancient parchment, "is the prophecy of the Moonshade Queen, written 300 years ago by the last great seer of the Balanced Ones, just before the Purge began." The scroll contained text in that same unreadable language, but below the text was an illustration that made Serena's breath catch. A female wolf with silver-white fur stood atop a mountain, a crown of moonlight around her head. Beside her was a massive black wolf with golden eyes, their forms partially merged as though they were 2 halves of one being. Around them, wolves of all colors formed a circle, while shadowy figures with red eyes lurked at the margins. "When silver becomes salvation instead of death," Catherine translated, her finger tracing the ancient words. "When the last moonshade joins with the golden king, balance shall return to the broken wheel, the 3 paths shall be restored, and the red shadow shall be banished for 1,000 years." Serena stared at the illustration, an unsettling recognition stirring within her. That can't be about me. Can't it? Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. The last Moonshade, the golden king with eyes like the sun, the silver that saves instead of kills, the timing of your meeting during the very storm the Red Moon Society hoped would kill him. She carefully rolled the scroll, returning it to its case. Prophecies are tricky things, easy to dismiss until they're fulfilled before your eyes. Before Serena could respond, alarms sounded throughout the fortress, high and urgent. Catherine tensed, listening. "Perimeter breach," she said, already moving toward the exit. "The Red Eyes have found us." They rushed through the corridors, following the sound of shouted commands and running feet. In the main hall, they found Magnus and his guards already preparing for battle, donning armor provided by the fortress armory. "Northeast wall," Maximus reported tersely. "At least 30 Red Eyes, maybe more. They're using the old mining tunnels we thought collapsed." "Evacuate the non-combatants to the inner sanctum," Magnus ordered. "Defensive positions along the main corridor. No one faces them alone. They're stronger than they look." His gaze found Serena. Through the bond, she felt his concern for her safety warring with his recognition of her newfound strength. "Stay with Catherine," he told her. "She knows the fortress better than anyone." "The ritual," Serena reminded him. "We found a cure for the poisoning, but we need time to prepare it." Conflict flashed across his features. The king's duty to defend his people versus his own survival. "After we secure the fortress," he decided, "the immediate threat comes first." Catherine had moved to a wall where weapons hung in carefully maintained racks. She selected 2 short swords with curved blades, testing their balance with practiced ease. "Can you fight, Moonshade?" she asked Serena. "Not with blades," Serena admitted, "but I have other skills." Catherine nodded, understanding. "Then use them. The infirmary will need help soon enough." She paused, then added in a lower voice, "But keep Moonfire close. The Red Eyes fear silver more than any conventional weapon." The battle came to them faster than expected. The Red Eyes moved with unnatural speed through the fortress corridors, their distorted forms more horrifying in the confined space than they had been in the open forest. They fought with savage intensity, seemingly indifferent to injuries that would have incapacitated normal wolves. Serena found herself in the improvised infirmary, treating wounded soldiers as they were brought in from the fighting. Her knowledge of herbs and field medicine proved invaluable, her small hands working with precision to close wounds and stabilize the injured. Through the pack bond, she monitored the royal guards, feeling their exertion, their determination, their pain when injuries occurred. Most of all, she felt Magnus, his strength diminishing as the silver poisoning sapped his energy while he fought. A crash from the corridor outside the infirmary drew her attention. The sounds of fighting had drawn closer. The Red Eyes were pushing deeper into the fortress, despite the defenders' efforts. The door burst inward, revealing one of the twisted creatures. It had once been a wolf, perhaps even a werewolf, but corruption had warped it beyond recognition. Its limbs were elongated, joints bending in unnatural directions. Its fur was patchy, revealing gray skin beneath. But most disturbing were its eyes, blood red and filled with malevolent intelligence. Serena moved instinctively between the creature and the wounded. Her hand found the silver dagger at her ankle, drawing it in one smooth motion. The Red Eye snarled at the sight of the weapon, but hunger overcame its caution. It lunged for the nearest injured soldier, claws extended. Serena met its charge head-on, surprising herself with her own speed and confidence. The silver dagger flashed, catching the creature across its outstretched arm. Where silver met corrupted flesh, the reaction was immediate and violent. Gray lines spread from the wound, the flesh disintegrating as though centuries of decay were occurring in seconds. The creature howled in pain and rage, recoiling from the silver's touch. It circled more cautiously now, recognizing Serena as the greater threat despite her small size. Behind her, the wounded soldiers watched in stunned silence as an apparent Omega faced down the nightmare that had nearly killed seasoned warriors. The red-eye feinted left, then struck with blinding speed from the right. Serena anticipated the move, ducking under its swing and driving her dagger upward into its torso. Silver met the creature's heart, and it erupted into gray ash, collapsing around the blade without leaving a trace of blood. Serena stood motionless for a moment, the silver dagger still raised, now coated with a fine layer of ash. The ash, the final component needed for Magnus's cure. Through the bond, she felt a spike of pain so intense it nearly drove her to her knees. Magnus. The poisoning had reached a critical stage, accelerated by the exertion of battle. He was fading fast. Gathering her resolve, Serena scooped the gray ash into a small pouch provided by one of the soldiers. "Guard them," she instructed the most able-bodied of the wounded. "I need to reach the king." She moved through the corridors with newfound purpose, the silver dagger still in hand. The sounds of battle guided her, growing louder as she approached the main hall. There she found chaos, soldiers fighting alongside the royal guards against at least a dozen red-eyes. In the center of the hall stood Magnus, his golden eyes now dimmed with pain, the silver mark on his chest visibly spreading with each passing moment. Yet he fought on, his movements slower than before, but still deadly. Beside him, Catherine and Valencia worked in seamless tandem, their fighting styles complementary despite having never trained together. Serena wove through the battle, avoiding direct confrontation where possible, using her small size and speed to advantage. When a red-eye blocked her path, she struck with precision rather than power, letting Silver do what strength could not. She reached Magnus just as his legs buckled beneath him. Catching him was impossible given their size disparity, but she managed to slow his fall, guiding him to his knees rather than a complete collapse. "Serena," he gasped, the word barely audible over the sounds of battle. "You shouldn't be here." "I have the final component," she told him, showing the pouch of ash. "We can perform the ritual now." His laugh held no humor. "In the middle of a battle? Even if there were time, I don't have the strength left." "Then take mine," she said, placing her hand over his heart, where the silver poison pulsed visibly beneath his skin. "Through the bond. Take what you need." Magnus's golden eyes widened in alarm. "No, it could kill you. And if we do nothing, the poison will definitely kill you." She pressed her hand more firmly against his chest, feeling the unnatural heat of the silver corruption. "Trust me, Magnus. Trust what I am." For a moment he resisted, his protective instinct warring with necessity. Then, with a barely perceptible nod, he surrendered to her will. Serena closed her eyes, focusing on the bond between them. She visualized her strength flowing into him, not just physical power, but the unique resilience of her Moonshade blood. Through the connection, she felt the poison react to her presence, recoiling from the touch of her essence as it had before. But this was different from the temporary treatment she had administered in her cabin. This was deeper, more fundamental. She wasn't just holding the poison at bay, she was directing her blood to attack it, to neutralize it at its source. The process was painful for them both. Magnus's back arched in agony as the silver poison fought against extraction. Serena felt each moment of his suffering through the bond, experienced it as though it were her own. But she persisted, her will unshakable, her conviction absolute. Around them, the battle continued, though Catherine and Valencia had moved to form a protective ring around the connected pair. Through dimming awareness, Serena noted other royal guards joining the defensive circle, recognizing instinctively that whatever was happening between their king and the Moonshade was crucial to their survival. Time lost meaning as Serena poured more of herself into the bond, directing her blood to seek and destroy every particle of silver corruption. She was vaguely aware of her own strength fading, of darkness encroaching at the edges of her consciousness. But still she pushed on, determined that if one of them must fall, it would be her rather than him. Just when she felt herself slipping into unconsciousness, something extraordinary happened. The bond between them flared with new intensity, no longer a one-way channel, but a true circuit. Magnus's strength began to flow back to her, even as she continued to neutralize the poison in his system. His hand covered hers where it rested against his heart. Together, his voice whispered in her mind, "Not you for me, us for each other." The balance shifted. What had been sacrifice became cooperation, synergy, two powers working in harmony rather than one depleting itself for the other. The silver poison, caught between opposing forces, began to dissipate, breaking down into harmless components that could be naturally expelled. With a final surge of shared power, they completed the purge. The silver mark on Magnus's chest faded, leaving only a faint scar in the shape of a crescent moon. Through the bond, Serena felt his strength returning, his life force stabilizing, the pain receding. Only then did she allow herself to collapse, spent beyond exhaustion. Magnus caught her this time, his renewed strength more than sufficient to support her small form. Through the pack link, she felt his concern, his gratitude, his admiration. "The battle," she managed to whisper. "Nearly won," he assured her. Indeed, the sounds of fighting had diminished significantly. The defensive circle around them had pushed outward, driving the remaining Red Eyes back toward the fortress entrance. As if summoned by his confidence, Commander Maximus appeared before them, blood-spattered but triumphant. "The enemy retreats, Your Majesty. Our forces pursue." "No pursuit," Magnus countermanded. "Secure the fortress first. Make certain no corrupted ones remain inside our walls." Maximus nodded acknowledgement, his gaze moving to Serena, still cradled in Magnus's arms. "The Omega saved you again," he observed. "Not an Omega," Magnus corrected, his voice carrying easily across the now quieting hall. "A Moonshade, the last of the balanced ones, and according to ancient prophecy, the future queen of the 5 kingdoms." Serena, hovering on the edge of consciousness, felt his declaration reverberate through the bond, echoed by the royal guard's collective affirmation. Not shock or disbelief, but recognition, as though they had known all along that she was meant for more than the life she'd been forced to lead. As darkness finally claimed her, one thought remained clear in her fading awareness. Whatever destiny awaited her, whatever battle still lay ahead, she would face them not alone as she had for so many years, but surrounded by wolves who saw her true worth. She woke in unfamiliar surroundings, a chamber carved from the living rock of the mountain, illuminated by soft light from crystal formations embedded in the walls. The bed beneath her was more comfortable than any she had known, piled with furs and fine linens. Her body ached with the aftermath of magical exertion, but the pain was distant, manageable. Catherine sat in a chair nearby, her silver braid gleaming in the crystal light. She was reading from a worn leather volume that Serena recognized with a jolt of surprise. "My mother's journal," she gasped, her voice rough from disuse. Catherine looked up, a smile warming her stern features. "Not lost after all. One of the guards salvaged it from your cabin before the collapse. He thought it might be important." Serena struggled to sit up, wincing as her muscles protested the movement. "How long have I been unconscious?" 3 days, Catherine replied, closing the journal carefully. "You nearly died neutralizing the king's poisoning. Even with your Moonshade blood, the expenditure was almost too great." Memory returned in fragments. The battle in the Great Hall. The ritual performed without preparation, fueled by desperation and instinct rather than careful planning. Magnus's strength joining with hers at the critical moment. "Magnus," she said, concern flooding through her. "Is he—" "Fully recovered," Catherine assured her. "The poison is gone without a trace. The royal physician calls it miraculous. Those of us who understand the old ways know better." Relief washed through Serena, followed quickly by confusion as she processed Catherine's earlier words. 3 days? But the Red Moon Society, Victor, the threat to the kingdom? "Hasn't vanished," Catherine acknowledged, "but it has been temporarily disrupted. The attack on Ravengard was meant to finish what the Storm and Silver had begun. Their failure has forced them to retreat and regroup." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "Which gives us precious time to prepare for what comes next. Tell me, Serena Moonshade, how much do you know about the history of our kind? The true history, not the sanitized version taught by modern packs." "Almost nothing," Serena admitted. "Only what my mother passed down through her journal, and even that was fragmented, coded to avoid detection." Catherine nodded as though this confirmed a suspicion. "Then your education begins now. You cannot fulfill your destiny if you do not understand your heritage." For the next hour, Catherine shared knowledge that had been systematically erased from common pack history. She spoke of the ancient times when werewolves lived in harmony with their dual nature, when the three paths offered different but equally valued ways of serving the pack. She described the rise of power-hungry alphas who feared the balanced one's ability to wield silver, to judge even the strongest based on justice rather than might. "The Great Purge began 300 years ago," she explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Led by an alpha who called himself the Crimson King, he convinced other alphas that the balanced ones threatened natural order, that their immunity to silver made them dangerous abominations. One by one, the great balanced families were hunted down, slaughtered in the name of purity." "But some survived," Serena said. "My family, others?" Catherine's expression turned grim. "Very few. The Moonshades were thought completely exterminated. Your ancestors must have gone into deep hiding, disguising themselves as ordinary Omegas to avoid detection." She gestured to the journal, "passing knowledge in secret from mother to daughter, waiting for a time when balance might be restored." "And now?" Serena asked. "What does the Red Moon Society want? Why now?" "They seek to complete what the Crimson King began, to eliminate the last traces of the old knowledge, to cement alpha dominance forever." Catherine's eyes hardened. "They feared Magnus from the beginning. He was different from his predecessors, more concerned with justice than power. When he began dismantling the old hierarchy, creating laws that protected Omegas and provided advancement based on merit, they saw their worst fears realized." She looked at Serena with new intensity. "And then you appeared, a true Moonshade, bound to the Golden King, just as the prophecy foretold. You represent everything they fear, the return of balance, the end of their unchallenged dominance." The weight of this destiny settled over Serena like a physical burden. She, who had spent her life simply trying to survive from one day to the next, now stood at the center of a conflict centuries in the making. "I'm not ready for this," she whispered. "No one ever is," Catherine replied, her voice softening with unexpected compassion. "But ready or not, the wheel of history has turned. The question isn't whether you're prepared, but whether you will stand and face what comes." Before Serena could respond, the chamber door opened to admit Magnus. He had fully recovered from the poisoning, his golden eyes bright with renewed vitality, his powerful form moving with the fluid grace she remembered from their first meeting. He wore clothing now, finely made but practical, a warrior king rather than a pampered monarch. His gaze found hers immediately, relief visible in his expression. Through the bond, she felt his genuine joy at seeing her awake, his concern for her well-being, and something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster despite her exhaustion. "Catherine," he acknowledged the older woman, "I need a moment with Serena." Catherine rose, giving Serena a meaningful look before departing. "Remember what I said, Moonshade. History waits for no one." When they were alone, Magnus crossed to sit beside Serena on the edge of the bed. Up close, she could see the silver scar where the poison had nearly reached his heart, now shaped like a perfect crescent moon. "You saved me," he said simply. "Again." "We saved each other," she corrected, remembering the moment when the bond had shifted from sacrifice to cooperation. A smile touched his lips. "So we did." He hesitated, then continued more seriously. "Catherine has told you about the prophecy, about what it might mean. That I'm somehow destined to be a queen?" Serena couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "Magnus, 3 days ago I was an outcast Omega living in a shed. How can I possibly be what the prophecy describes?" "The same way a king who is never meant to rule can change centuries of tradition," he replied. "The same way 15 elite warriors can nearly die in a blizzard, only to be saved by the very wolf others deemed worthless. Destiny finds us whether we seek it or not." He took her hand, his much larger one engulfing hers completely. "But I'm not asking you to accept a throne, Serena. Not yet. I'm asking you to continue the journey with us, to help us face what's coming. The Red Moon Society won't stop. Victor won't stop. And I—" He paused, vulnerability showing through his usual confidence. "I need you, not just for your Moonshade blood or the prophecy, but for who you are." Through the bond, she felt the truth of his words, the genuine respect and admiration behind them. This wasn't a king commanding an asset, but a wolf asking another to stand beside him against the darkness. "I'll come with you," she said. The decision felt right, inevitable even, as though her entire life had been leading to this moment. To Silverhelm, to wherever this path leads, not because of prophecy or destiny, but because it's the right thing to do. Magnus's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire countenance. "Then rest today. Tomorrow we begin the journey to the capital, and whatever awaits us there, we face it together." As he left, Serena lay back against the pillows, her mind racing despite her body's continued exhaustion. In the span of a few days, her entire world had transformed. She had gone from invisible Omega to potential queen, from survival to purpose, from isolation to belonging. Whatever came next, battles, politics, the weight of prophecy, she would face it with the strength she had always possessed but never fully recognized. The strength of a moonshade, the strength of balance. The journey to Silverhelm began at dawn 3 days after Serena regained consciousness. The fortress courtyard bustled with activity as soldiers prepared the royal caravan, not the ostentatious procession typical of royal travel, but a heavily armed escort designed for speed and protection. Magnus had made it clear they would not risk unnecessary ceremony when the Red Moon Society might strike at any moment. Serena stood near the gates, dressed in clothing designed specifically for her, practical garments that honored her new status while accommodating her smaller frame. The tunic and pants were crafted from fine wool, dyed deep silver blue, embroidered with subtle moonshade symbols along the collar and cuffs. A short cape of midnight blue fastened at her shoulders, lined with fur for warmth. Most striking were the boots, custom-made overnight by the fortress leatherworker, reinforced for travel but fitted with a concealed sheath where Moonfire, her father's silver dagger, rested against her ankle. Catherine approached, her own travel gear suggesting she intended to join their journey. "The king requests your presence in the war room. Final preparations before departure." Serena followed the silver-haired warrior through Ravengard's stone corridors, noting the respect in the eyes of soldiers they passed, not the wary deference shown to dangerous alphas, but genuine admiration. Catherine's reputation as the Silver Wolf clearly extended beyond mere legend. "They've heard what you did," Catherine remarked, noticing Serena's observation. "Neutralizing silver poison, fighting red eyes, saving the king twice in the span of days. Word travels fast among wolves." "I only did what was necessary," Serena replied, uncomfortable with the attention. Catherine's laugh held genuine amusement. "A true Moonshade response. Your ancestors were the same. Immense power wielded without seeking glory or dominance. It's why the power-hungry feared them so." The war room was crowded with Magnus's royal guard and Commander Maximus's senior officers. They surrounded a large table where maps were spread, routes marked in red ink. Magnus stood at the head, his golden eyes lifting immediately as Serena entered. Through their bond, she felt his welcome, warm and immediate. "Good, we're all here," he said, returning his attention to the maps. "The journey to Silverhelm typically takes 5 days following the main roads. We cannot risk such exposure." "The mountain pass is faster but more dangerous," Alaric, the massive brown-furred guard, pointed out, "especially with red eyes potentially waiting in ambush." Which is exactly why we'll take it, Magnus decided. They'll expect us to choose safety, to travel with a larger escort along the main roads. The pass allows for a smaller, faster group, the Royal Guard, Catherine, and Serena. We can reach the capital in 3 days if we push hard. Alara, the blonde healer, glanced at Serena with concern. The pace will be grueling. Is Serena recovered enough for such a journey? Before Magnus could respond, Serena spoke firmly. I am, and I would prefer not to be discussed as though I'm not present. A smile touched Magnus's lips, approval radiating through their bond. The Moonshade has spoken. He turned back to the maps. Maximus, your forces will create a diversion. Travel conspicuously along the main road as though escorting us. Draw attention and, if necessary, engage any Red Moon forces that reveal themselves. The commander nodded grimly. My wolves will not fail you, Majesty. Valencia, Magnus continued, addressing his auburn-haired intelligence officer, you'll travel ahead alone. Reach the capital before us, assess the situation, determine which council members might have Red Moon connections. And Victor? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Magnus's expression hardened. By now he knows his assassins failed. He'll be preparing his defense, fabricating evidence against Serena, marshalling his allies on the council. He thinks I'm dead, Serena pointed out, lost in the storm along with my cabin. A temporary advantage, Valencia agreed, but one that will vanish the moment you set foot in Silverhelm. Magnus nodded. Which is why we must be prepared for immediate confrontation. The council will convene at my command, but many members harbor sympathies for the old ways. They'll resist change, question my judgment, attempt to discredit Serena's testimony. They fear what she represents, Catherine interjected. The return of balance, the end of their artificial hierarchy, the restoration of the ancient ways where power was shared rather than hoarded. They fear her, Alara said simply, looking at Serena with something like wonder. And they should. The journey through the mountain pass proved as challenging as predicted. They traveled primarily in wolf form for speed and endurance, shifting to human only when absolutely necessary for rest or to navigate particularly treacherous sections of trail. The Royal Guard moved with military precision, scouts ranging ahead and behind, always alert for signs of ambush or pursuit. On the second night, they made camp in a defensible cave high on the mountainside. Watches were established, fires kept small and well shielded to avoid detection. Serena found herself seated beside Magnus on a rocky outcropping just outside the cave entrance, both in human form, wrapped in the warm cloaks provided at Ravengard. The night sky spread above them, impossibly vast and brilliant with stars. Below, the mountain fell away in steep slopes blanketed with snow that gleamed silver in the moonlight. In the far distance, barely visible on the horizon, the first glimmers of civilization marked the beginning of the central territories surrounding Silverhelm. You're quiet tonight, Magnus observed, his deep voice soft in the mountain stillness. I'm thinking about what awaits us, Serena admitted. About facing Victor and the council. About what it means to be the last Moonshade. Having second thoughts? She shook her head. No, just adjusting. A week ago, my entire world was that tiny cabin and daily survival. Now, she gestured at the vast landscape spread before them. Now, I'm apparently part of a centuries-old prophecy involving the future of all werewolves. Magnus was silent for a moment. When I became king, he said finally, it was not by choice, but by blood. My father died defending the borders against a rival kingdom. I was barely 20, raised as a warrior rather than a ruler. Suddenly, thousands of lives depended on my decisions. Centuries of tradition rested on my shoulders, and enemies surrounded me on every side. How did you bear it? Serena asked, sensing the vulnerability behind his words. One day at a time, one decision at a time. His golden eyes found hers in the darkness. And by finding wolves I could trust, whose strength complemented mine. Through the bond, his meaning became clear. He saw her as such a wolf, someone whose different abilities balanced his own. I'm still learning my strength, Serena said softly. still discovering what it means to be Moonshade. As am I, Catherine's voice came from behind them. The silver wolf approached, her movements silent despite the rocky terrain. Tomorrow we enter more populated territories. You should know what to expect in Silverhelm. She settled beside them, her silver braid gleaming in the moonlight. The capital was built by the first king 5 centuries ago, carved into the face of Mount Argentum. Unlike Ravengard, which was designed purely for defense, Silverhelm serves as both fortress and symbol, a city of terraced streets and soaring towers, home to 50,000 wolves from all 5 kingdoms. And the council? Serena asked. 12 alphas, ostensibly representing the major territories. Catherine's tone made her opinion of this arrangement clear. In reality, most represent only their own interests or those of the old nobility. They advise the king, adjudicate major disputes, and in theory, serve as a check against monarchical overreach. In theory, Magnus echoed wryly. In practice, they've become increasingly resistant to change, particularly the reforms I've instituted to protect Omegas and reward merit over birth status. Catherine nodded. They'll be your greatest obstacle. Victor will have been working to turn them against you, using your disappearance during the storm as evidence of poor judgment, questioning your fitness to rule. Let him try, Magnus said, his voice taking on the edge of authority that marked him as Alpha King. We have truth on our side, and more importantly, we have proof of their treachery. The silver poisoning, the red eyes, the attack on Ravengard, all can be traced back to the Red Moon Society. Truth doesn't always prevail in politics, Catherine warned. Be prepared for deception, for attacks from unexpected quarters. And you, Serena? Magnus asked, his golden gaze intense in the moonlight. Are you ready to face Victor, to tell your story before the council, to stand against wolves who have every reason to fear what you represent? Serena considered the question, feeling the weight of expectation through the bond. Not just Magnus's, but that of every royal guard, every wolf who believed in the prophecy's promise of restored balance. I spent 14 years surviving a pack that wanted me dead, she said finally. I faced down Red Eyes with nothing but a silver dagger and determination. I saved a king through a blizzard that should have killed us all. She met Magnus's gaze steadily. I'm ready. The faintest smile touched his lips. Then they should be very afraid indeed. They reached Silverhelm on the afternoon of the 3rd day, approaching from the northeastern ridge, where forest cover provided concealment until the last possible moment. The city rose before them like something from ancient legend, a massive structure carved directly into the mountainside, its towers and spires seeming to grow organically from the living rock. Unlike the purely utilitarian design of Ravengard, Silverhelm blended strength with beauty, its white stone gleaming in the winter sunlight, windows of colored glass catching the light like jewels. It's magnificent, Serena breathed, momentarily forgetting the danger that awaited within those walls. It was built to inspire awe, Catherine said beside her, to remind visitors and residents alike of werewolf achievement, of our capacity to shape the world rather than merely inhabit it. Magnus led them down a hidden path that wound through dense pine forest toward a small, unobtrusive gate in the eastern wall. The Hunter's Door, he explained, known only to the royal family and guard. It will allow us to enter undetected, giving us time to assess the situation before announcing our return. The gate was indeed well concealed, visible only when standing directly before it. No guards monitored this entrance, but a complex lock mechanism required Magnus's blood to activate. The door swung inward silently, revealing a narrow tunnel carved through the mountain's heart. Valencia should have reached the capital yesterday, Magnus said as they moved through the passage. She'll meet us in the royal quarters with intelligence about current conditions. The tunnel eventually opened into what appeared to be a private garden, enclosed on all sides by high walls. Fruit trees stood dormant in winter sleep, their branches bare against the pale sky. Ornamental pools had frozen into delicate sculptures of ice. Despite the season's starkness, the garden retained a sense of peace and sanctuary, isolated from the city's bustle. A door at the garden's far end led into the palace proper, specifically the royal wing. Here, the architecture grew more intimate, with lower ceilings and smaller chambers than Serena had expected for a king's residence. The decor favored practicality over ostentation. Comfortable furnishings, well-stocked bookshelves, maps and weapons displayed with purpose rather than vanity. Valencia awaited them in what appeared to be Magnus's private study, her expression grave. "Welcome back, Your Majesty. The situation is worse than we feared." Magnus gestured for her to continue, his face revealing nothing, though Serena felt his concern through the bond. "Victor arrived 2 days ago with Beta Reiner and several other Ironwood wolves. They've been granted audience with the council, spreading their version of events, claiming you disappeared irresponsibly during the storm, abandoning your duties for a border inspection that could have waited." "Have they mentioned Serena?" Catherine asked. Valencia shook her head. "They believe her dead in the storm, but they've brought evidence of your declining judgment, Your Majesty. Records of your reforms favoring Omegas. Testimony from Alphas who claim these changes undermine natural order." "And the Red Moon connection?" Magnus pressed. "Well concealed. On the surface, Victor presents himself as a concerned Alpha worried about the kingdom's stability. But I've identified at least 3 council members with likely Red Moon affiliations: Councillor Thorne, Lady Varick, and High General Dorn." Serena recognized none of these names, but felt Magnus's reaction through the bond. Not surprise, but confirmation of existing suspicions. "And the poison attempt? The red eyes?" he asked. "No evidence connecting Victor directly. The Red Moon Society operates through layers of deniability. However," Valencia's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, "I found this in Victor's guest quarters while he attended council." She produced a small object wrapped in black cloth. Unwrapped, it revealed a ring of dull metal etched with symbols identical to those Serena had seen on the twisted red eyes. "The mark of corruption," Catherine breathed, not touching the object. "A focus used to create and control the red eyes. This is damning evidence. No Alpha could possess this innocently." "Then we have what we need," Magnus decided. "The council convenes tomorrow at midday. We'll make our entrance then, when all witnesses are present." "And until then?" Alaric asked. "We prepare, rest, restore our strength." Magnus's gaze found Serena. "And ensure our Moonshade is ready for what's to come." That night, Serena stood before a mirror in the chamber provided for her, adjacent to Magnus's own quarters. The reflection startled her, not because it had changed dramatically, but because it showed what had always been there beneath the neglect and malnutrition. Her face had filled out slightly, cheekbones still prominent but no longer gaunt. Her eyes, the deep green of forest shadows, held confidence rather than wariness. Most striking was her posture, straight-backed and assured, no longer the defensive hunch of an Omega expecting abuse. Catherine entered without knocking, carrying a bundle wrapped in aged leather. "The king requests your presence for the final war council, but first, there's something you should see." She unwrapped the bundle on Serena's bed, revealing garments unlike any Serena had seen before. The outer robe was silver white, the color of her wolf form, woven with threads that seemed to capture and reflect light from every angle. Beneath was a fitted tunic of deepest blue, embroidered with silver symbols that matched those on her father's dagger. Leggings of supple leather completed the ensemble, along with boots that appeared ordinary until Catherine turned them to reveal sheaths sewn into the inner sides, perfectly sized for moonfire. "Moonshade ceremonial attire," Catherine explained, her voice unusually soft with reverence. "Preserved in the royal archives since the Purge, awaiting the prophecy's fulfillment. The last Moonshade Queen wore these before the bloodlines were hunted to near extinction." Serena touched the fabric hesitantly. "I can't possibly—" "You can and you will," Catherine interrupted. "Tomorrow, you face the council not as an Omega begging justice, but as the last of an ancient lineage demanding recognition. You must look the part." The War Council lasted deep into the night. Maps were studied, strategies debated, contingencies planned for every conceivable outcome. Throughout, Serena remained silent, observing the interactions between Magnus and his inner circle, noting the efficient way they anticipated problems and solved them collectively, without concern for rank or status. This was what a true pack could be, she realized. Not the rigid hierarchy of Ironwood where alphas commanded and others obeyed, but a cooperative unit where each member contributed according to their strengths. The Royal Guards might defer to Magnus in matters of final decision, but they did not hesitate to offer contrary opinions or alternative approaches when warranted. "And if the Council refuses to hear evidence?" Alara was asking as the discussion wound toward conclusion. "If they support Victor's version of events?" "Then I invoke royal prerogative," Magnus answered. "The Alpha King can, in extraordinary circumstances, act without Council approval." "That hasn't been done in 7 generations," Valencia pointed out. "It could trigger open rebellion from traditionalist territories." "So be it." Magnus's voice carried absolute conviction. "I will not allow the Red Moon Society to continue their corruption, not when we finally have hope for true balance." His gaze found Serena's across the table, and through their bond she felt his unwavering resolve. Not just political determination, but something deeper, more personal, a commitment to her, to what she represented, to the future they might build together. Sleep came fitfully that night, Serena's mind racing with preparations and possibilities. The bond hummed with shared tension, Magnus's own restlessness echoing hers across their mental connection. Dawn found her already awake, standing at her window watching the first light touch Silverhelm's white towers. Catherine arrived to help with preparations, bringing 2 female attendants who assisted with the ceremonial garments. The process was more complex than Serena had anticipated. Each layer carried symbolic significance, each fold and fastening performed in specific sequence, while Catherine recited the ancient meanings in a language Serena didn't recognize but instinctively understood. "Strength and balance, power and restraint, wisdom and harmony," the Silver Wolf translated as the final sash was secured. The Moonshade Creed, passed down since the First Awakening when wolves learned to walk as humans. The completed ensemble transformed Serena. The silver-white outer robe caught light and motion, creating the impression of flowing moonlight with every movement. The blue undertunic provided striking contrast, while the fitted leather leggings and boots allowed for unrestricted movement if fighting became necessary. Her dark hair had been braided in an intricate style that incorporated small silver beads, reminiscent of stars against night sky. "Now you look like who you truly are," Catherine said with satisfaction. "The last Moonshade, the prophecy fulfilled." The great council chamber occupied the highest level of Silverhelm's central tower, a circular room with tiered seating rising along the walls and a speaking floor in the center. Massive windows of clear crystal provided panoramic views of the surrounding mountains, while cleverly designed light shafts directed sunlight to illuminate the central floor regardless of the sun's position. By tradition, council sessions were open to any wolf with legitimate business before the governing body. Today, with rumors of the Alpha King's return racing through the city, spectators packed the upper galleries. The council members themselves occupied a raised dais opposite the main entrance. 12 alphas in formal regalia arranged in a semicircle behind an imposing table of polished stone. Victor and his Ironwood wolves had been granted seats of honor in the front row of spectator seating. He sat with the confidence of one who believed victory already assured. Beta Reiner and the female Serena recognized as Cassandra flanking him like triumphant generals. At precisely midday, Chancellor Thorne rose to open proceedings. A tall, severe wolf with iron-gray hair and cold eyes, he carried himself with the arrogance of old nobility, his formal robes emphasizing his powerful build. "This council convenes to address matters of grave concern to the 5 kingdoms," he began, his voice carrying easily in the chamber's perfect acoustics. "Alpha Victor of Ironwood Pack brings testimony regarding the disappearance of our king during the recent storm, raising questions about leadership and succession that must be—" The massive doors at the chamber's rear swung open with deliberate force, cutting off Thorne's speech. Every head turned as Magnus strode into the chamber, resplendent in formal regalia of midnight blue and gold, the crown of the 5 kingdoms gleaming on his brow. Behind him came his royal guard in ceremonial armor, weapons prominently displayed, their formation precise and intimidating. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembly. Victor's expression transformed from smugness to shock, then quickly rearranged into a mask of pleased surprise that fooled no one who knew him. "Your Majesty," Chancellor Thorne recovered quickly, bowing with practiced deference that didn't reach his eyes. "We rejoice at your safe return. Alpha Victor informed us of your disappearance during the storm. We feared the worst." "Did you, Chancellor?" Magnus's voice carried dangerous undertones as he moved to the center of the speaking floor. How convenient that funeral arrangements had already begun, despite no body being recovered. Thorne's composure slipped momentarily. "Merely precautionary, Your Majesty. The storm's severity left little hope for survival." "Indeed." Magnus surveyed the council members, his golden gaze lingering on each face. "Yet here I stand, very much alive, with quite a story to tell this esteemed body." "We are eager to hear of your miraculous survival," Lady Varick interjected smoothly, her ageless beauty belied by eyes as calculating as a snake's. "But first, protocol demands we complete the business already before this council. Alpha Victor has raised concerns about recent policies that—" "Alpha Victor," Magnus interrupted, his voice hardening, "is the reason this council nearly found itself planning a coronation rather than welcoming its king's return." The chamber fell silent, tension crackling like lightning before a storm. "Your Majesty!" Victor rose from his seat, his expression a masterpiece of wounded dignity. "I don't understand. I came only out of concern for the kingdom when news reached us that you had vanished during the blizzard. A storm, I might add, that claimed many lives, including one of my own pack members." Now Magnus smiled, the expression reminiscent of a predator sighting prey. "Did it? Which member was that, Victor? Your Omega, perhaps? The one you deliberately abandoned to die alone in a cabin you knew couldn't withstand the storm's fury?" Victor's face revealed nothing, but Reiner shifted uncomfortably beside him. "A regrettable loss. The Omega chose to remain behind, despite our offer of shelter." "The Omega has a name," Magnus said, "and a quite different version of events." He turned toward the chamber doors, which opened once more. Catherine entered first, her silver hair and warrior's bearing drawing all eyes. Behind her came Serena, the Moonshade ceremonial attire transforming her into something otherworldly, the silver-white robe seeming to gather and reflect the chamber's light until she appeared to glow from within. The effect on the assembly was immediate and profound. Alphas who had ruled territories for decades found themselves rising involuntarily from their seats. Wolves who had never shown deference to anyone stared in confused wonder at the small figure who radiated power unlike anything they recognized. Victor's reaction proved most revealing. His face drained of color, shock giving way to naked fear before he could master his expression. "Impossible," he whispered, the word barely audible, yet carrying in the chamber's perfect acoustics. "Serena Moonshade," Magnus announced formally, extending his hand to guide her to the center of the speaking floor. "Last descendant of the Balanced Ones, survivor of Alpha Victor's attempted murder, and newest member of the Royal Pack." "Moonshade?" Chancellor Thorne's voice cracked with disbelief. "That bloodline was exterminated centuries ago." "Clearly not," Catherine stepped forward, "as her ability to wield silver proves beyond question." Murmurs swept the chamber, confusion and disbelief mingling with growing alarm. Council members exchanged significant glances, silent communications passing between those Serena now recognized as Red Moon sympathizers. Victor recovered his composure with visible effort. "This is absurd. The girl is an Omega from my pack, nothing more. Whatever tale she's spun for you, Your Majesty, is fiction designed to elevate her status beyond her natural place." "Her natural place?" Magnus's voice carried deadly calm. "And what place is that, Victor? Alone in a cabin with insufficient supplies during a killing storm? deliberately excluded from pack shelter while others gathered in safety and warmth? The pack house had limited resources, Victor countered smoothly. Difficult decisions had to be made. Surely as king, you understand prioritizing the strong over the weak when survival is at stake. What I understand, Magnus replied, is that you left her to die because you recognized what she was even before she did. You feared a true Moonshade in your pack, feared what would happen if others discovered her heritage. Uncertainty flickered across Victor's face. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't you? Serena spoke for the first time, her voice clear and steady in the hushed chamber. Is that why you had Beta Reiner place silver-laced traps along my gathering routes? Why you fostered isolation and weakness to prevent me from discovering my true nature? Victor's gaze hardened. Fantasies and delusions. The girl was always unstable, prone to imagination and exaggeration. Imagination didn't save 15 wolves from death in the blizzard, Magnus countered. Imagination didn't neutralize silver poison or defeat Red Eyes at Ravengard Fortress. Serena Moonshade saved my life and the lives of my royal guard, demonstrating courage and power that expose your lies for what they are. This is outrageous, Victor snarled, his careful composure cracking. I demand this council dismiss these accusations and focus on the real issue, the king's increasingly erratic policies favoring lesser wolves over their natural superiors. Lesser wolves? Serena stepped forward, her silver-white robe catching the light until she seemed haloed in moonlight. There are no lesser wolves, Victor, only different paths, different strengths, different purposes within the pack. The balanced ones understood this before power-hungry alphas rewrote our history to cement their dominance. She turned to address the council directly. For generations, you've perpetuated a lie. That hierarchy is natural, that some wolves are born to rule while others are born to serve. But the truth remains in our oldest records, in the prophecies that warned of imbalance, in the silver weapons that respond to Moonshade blood. From her boot, Serena withdrew Moonfire. The silver dagger gleamed in her hand, causing several council members to recoil instinctively. This blade has been a pass through my family for 15 generations, hidden along with the truth of our heritage. It burns any wolf ruled by dominance alone, but causes no harm to those who seek balance. She held the dagger toward Victor in clear challenge. Would you hold it, Alpha? Prove your natural superiority by taking silver in your hand without harm? Victor's face contorted with rage. Witch tricks and theater. I won't participate in this farce. Nor will I allow it to continue, Chancellor Thorne declared, rising from his seat. This council has heard enough baseless accusations. We will adjourn to consider— We will not adjourn, Magnus interrupted, his voice carrying the full weight of royal authority. Not until all evidence has been presented. He nodded to Valencia, who stepped forward with the cloth-wrapped ring recovered from Victor's quarters. This was found in Alpha Victor's possession, Magnus announced as Valencia unwrapped the object. A focus ring used to create and control Red Eyes, corrupted wolves whose humanity has been sacrificed to produce living weapons. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Even council members with suspected Red Moon connections appeared genuinely disturbed by this evidence. Planted, Victor spat. I've never seen that abomination before. Then perhaps you'd care to explain these, Magnus continued relentlessly. From within his formal robes, he produced a sealed document. Communications intercepted between you and other Red Moon Society members, detailing Operation Red Moon, the coordinated plan to eliminate progressive alphas throughout the 5 kingdoms, beginning with my assassination. Real fear flashed across Victor's face. Forgeries. Fabrications designed to discredit legitimate concerns about your fitness to rule. The silver poisoning that nearly killed me was no fabrication, Magnus countered. The Red-Eye attack on Ravengard was no fabrication. Your deliberate abandonment of a Moonshade Omega was no fabrication. As the exchange continued, Serena became aware of a subtle shift in the chamber's energy. Through the pack bond, she sensed Magnus's growing concern, not about the verbal confrontation, but about something else, something approaching. The warning came too late. With a sound like thunder, the crystal windows shattered inward, showering the assembly with glittering shards. Dark shapes hurtled through the openings, red eyes, dozens of them, their twisted forms even more horrifying in daylight. Chaos erupted. Spectators fled screaming toward the exits, while council members retreated behind their stone table. The royal guard moved with practiced efficiency, forming a protective circle around Magnus and Serena, weapons drawn. "Now, Thorn!" Victor shouted above the pandemonium. "Complete the ritual!" Chancellor Thorn raised his hands, revealing a medallion identical to Victor's ring but larger, more elaborate. He began chanting in a language that made Serena's skin crawl, words that seemed to bend reality around them. The air in the center of the chamber began to shimmer, then darken, forming a swirling vortex of shadow that pulsed with malevolent energy. From within that darkness, something began to emerge, a massive form with glowing red eyes and elongated limbs that bent at impossible angles. "The Crimson Alpha," Catherine gasped, her face pale with recognition. "They're bringing him back from the void." Understanding crashed through Serena's mind. Not just a political coup, but something far worse. The Red Moon Society sought to resurrect the architect of the Great Purge, the Crimson King, who had nearly eradicated the Balanced Ones 3 centuries ago. Magnus drew his sword, the blade gleaming with enchantments meant to combat supernatural threats. "Protect Serena at all costs," he commanded his guards. "If the prophecy is true, she's the only one who can stop this." The battle exploded across the council chamber. Royal guards engaged Red Eyes in desperate combat while Magnus fought his way toward Thorn, intent on disrupting the ritual. Victor and his ironwood wolves revealed their true allegiance, transforming into battle-ready forms that showed signs of partial corruption, not fully twisted like the Red Eyes, but changed in subtle, disturbing ways. Serena found herself separated from Magnus as the fighting intensified. Catherine remained at her side, the silver wolf proving her legendary status with every strike of her twin blades. Together they fought toward the shadow vortex, instinct telling Serena that whatever emerged must be confronted immediately before it fully materialized in their world. Through the bond, she felt Magnus's determination and growing pain. The silver poisoning might have been neutralized, but the ritual's dark energy was affecting him nonetheless, weakening his connection to the pack, to her. The bond between them flickered like a candle in strong wind, threatening to extinguish entirely. The bonding, Serena realized suddenly, it was never completed properly. That's why they're able to affect him through it. Catherine dispatched another red eye before responding. The ancient bonding requires more than the initial ritual. It must be sealed through the union of souls, something that hasn't been done in centuries. "How?" Serena demanded, ducking beneath claws that would have eviscerated her. "How do we complete it?" "Heart to heart, blood to blood," Catherine replied grimly. "But we need time, space, impossible in the middle of this chaos." The shadow vortex pulsed larger, the form within it becoming more distinct. A monstrous wolf the size of a horse, its fur the deep crimson of freshly spilled blood, its eyes burning like coals in a face distorted by centuries of hatred. "Time," Serena echoed, her gaze fixed on the emerging horror. "Time is exactly what we don't have." In that moment, knowledge surfaced from somewhere deep within her Moonshade heritage, not conscious learning, but instinctive understanding of power that had always been hers to claim. The silver dagger in her hand began to glow with inner light, responding to her awakening awareness. "Cover me," she told Catherine, determination hardening her voice. "I need to reach Magnus." Together they fought through the battle-filled chamber, moonfire cutting through corrupted flesh with terrible efficiency. Serena moved with newfound grace, each strike precise and purposeful, guided by instinct rather than training. Where the silver blade touched Red Eyes, they dissolved into ash. Where it passed near corrupted wolves, they recoiled in pain and terror. She reached Magnus just as he confronted Chancellor Thorn. The council leader had abandoned any pretense of loyalty, his formal robes discarded to reveal ceremonial garments emblazoned with the Red Moon emblem. The medallion in his hands pulsed with sickly light, in rhythm with the shadow vortex. "Too late, Golden King," Thorn laughed, his voice distorted by the power flowing through him. "The Crimson Alpha returns to restore true order. Your progressive reforms die today, along with the last Moonshade abomination." Magnus's sword flashed, aiming for the medallion, but Thorn deflected the blow with unexpected speed. The Chancellor was drawing power from the ritual, his movements unnaturally quick, his strength augmented beyond normal Alpha capacity. "Magnus!" Serena called, fighting toward him. "The bond, we need to complete it." Understanding flashed across his features, quickly followed by concern. "Not here, not now. The backlash could kill you if something goes wrong." "If we don't, we're all dead anyway," she countered, finally reaching his side. Through their bond, weakened but still present, she pushed her certainty, her determination, her absolute conviction that this was their only chance. The shadow vortex contracted suddenly, then expanded with explosive force. The Crimson Alpha's massive paw emerged, followed by a muzzle filled with teeth like daggers, eyes burning with hatred accumulated across centuries in the void. "Now, Magnus," Serena insisted, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Heart to heart, blood to blood." In a fluid motion that spoke of absolute trust, Magnus reversed his sword and drew the blade across his palm, opening a clean wound that welled immediately with blood. Serena did the same with Moonfire, the silver blade parting her skin without the burning sensation any other wolf would have experienced. They clasped hands, blood mingling, eyes locked in shared purpose. The incomplete bond between them flared with new intensity. No longer a simple connection, but a true joining of essence. Where before they had maintained separate identities connected by threads of pack magic, now those identities began to merge, strengths and abilities flowing freely between them. "No!" Thorn's scream cut through the chamber's chaos. He abandoned his position, lunging toward the joined pair with the medallion extended like a weapon. "Stop them! The prophecy cannot be fulfilled." Too late. The bonding surge reached critical momentum, creating a shockwave of pure silver-gold light that expanded outward from Magnus and Serena. Where it touched Red Eyes, they disintegrated instantly. Where it passed through corrupted wolves, it burned away the darkness, leaving them collapsed but purified. When the light reached the shadow vortex, the reaction was catastrophic. The Crimson Alpha howled in rage and agony as his partially materialized form began to dissolve, pulled back into the void, even as he fought to remain. Thorn, still clutching the medallion, found himself caught between worlds, part of him drawn into the collapsing vortex, part remaining anchored in the physical realm. His scream faded into the distance as the shadow portal imploded, taking with it the medallion, the Crimson Alpha, and Chancellor Thorn's corrupted soul. In the sudden silence that followed, Serena and Magnus remained at the chamber's center, still clasped hand in bloody hand, surrounded by the unconscious forms of those the light wave had purified. Only Victor remained standing, his expression a mask of hatred and fear as he backed toward the shattered windows. "This isn't over," he snarled, his voice barely recognizable as the corruption fought against the cleansing light. "The red moon rises again. The natural order cannot be denied." And before anyone could move to stop him, he leaped backward through the broken window, transforming into wolf form as he fell. His howl of defiance echoed from the cliffs below, then faded into silence. The completed bond pulsed between Magnus and Serena like a living thing, stronger than either of them individually. Through it flowed power, unlike anything recorded in werewolf history, not just alpha strength or moonshade balance, but a perfect synthesis of both. "The Golden King and the Silver Queen," Catherine whispered, her voice filled with wonder as she beheld them, just as the prophecy foretold. Around the chamber, council members and spectators who had weathered the battle began to rise, staring in awe at the transformed pair. The light had changed Magnus as much as Serena. His golden eyes now held flecks of silver, while her green eyes now shimmered with gold at their centers. Both radiated power that felt fundamentally different from traditional alpha dominance, not a force that demanded submission, but an energy that invited alignment. "The three paths," Magnus said, his voice carrying easily in the hushed chamber. "Strength, cunning, balance, all equal, all necessary, all valued." He turned to the remaining council members, those not corrupted by Red Moon influence. "This is the future I offer the five kingdoms, not domination by alphas, but true cooperation between all wolves according to their gifts." Lady Varick, one of the few council members who had stood against the Red Eyes rather than fleeing, stepped forward. Though clearly shaken, her voice remained strong. "What you propose overturns centuries of tradition, Your Majesty. The hierarchy has maintained order since the Great Division." "The hierarchy," Serena responded, "was built on lies, on the systematic elimination of those who maintained balance, on the deliberate suppression of knowledge that contradicted alpha supremacy." She gestured toward the unconscious forms of corrupted wolves. "This is where unchecked dominance leads, to corruption of the soul, to wolves so consumed by power they would resurrect ancient evil rather than accept equality." One by one, the remaining council members acknowledged the truth before them. The evidence was undeniable. Red Moon corruption had infiltrated the highest levels of leadership, nearly resulting in catastrophe for all werewolves. Whatever reservations they might harbor about change, none could argue for maintaining a system that had brought them to this precipice. The days that followed brought rapid transformation to Silverhelm and the Five Kingdoms. With the Red Moon Society's leadership destroyed or scattered, their corrupting influence began to fade from affected territories. Wolves who had been partially turned reverted to normal once removed from the medallion's power, though many would carry scars, both physical and psychological, from their experience. The council underwent complete reorganization. No longer comprised solely of alphas, it now included representatives from all three paths, selected for wisdom and capability rather than dominance or bloodline. Catherine, the Silver Wolf, accepted appointment as head of a newly formed guardian order tasked with identifying and training wolves who showed gifts from multiple paths. Most significant was the rediscovery and restoration of ancient knowledge. Records long suppressed or believed destroyed came to light once wolves felt safe, revealing hidden archives. The true history of werewolf society before the Great Division emerged piece by piece, confirming what the Moonshades had preserved in secret for centuries. Through it all, Magnus and Serena worked as one, their completed bond allowing seamless cooperation that transcended normal communication. Where he brought decisive action and protective strength, she brought healing wisdom and balanced perspective. Together they embodied the ideal their reformed society strove toward: harmony between different natures, cooperation between diverse gifts. 1 year after the Battle of the Council Chamber, as it came to be known, wolves from all five kingdoms gathered in Silverhelm for an unprecedented ceremony. The great plaza before the palace filled with thousands of spectators from every territory, every rank, every background. Gone were the rigid separations that had once defined werewolf gatherings, with omegas relegated to the margins and alphas claiming the center. Now they mingled freely, equal citizens under reformed law. On a dais erected at the plaza's center stood Magnus in formal regalia, the crown of the five kingdoms gleaming on his brow. Beside him stood Catherine, Alaric, Valencia, and other key figures from the new Guardian Order, their silver-blue uniforms distinctive against the colorful crowd. At precisely midday, when sunlight illuminated the entire plaza, a hush fell over the assembly. From the palace emerged Serena, transformed by the year's events from the half-starved Omega of Ironwood to the confident leader who now commanded respect throughout the kingdoms. Her ceremonial attire combined elements from all three paths, the strength symbolizing midnight blue of traditional alpha garb, the cunning representing amber accents of beta raiment, and the silver-white balance markings of Moonshade heritage. Her dark hair, longer now, had been braided with silver and gold threads that caught the sunlight with every movement. As she crossed the plaza to stand beside Magnus, Wolves throughout the assembly shifted spontaneously to their animal forms, an ancient gesture of respect rarely seen in modern times. A sea of lupine faces turned upward, watching in silent reverence as the ceremony began. 1 year ago, Magnus addressed the gathering, his voice carrying effortlessly across the plaza, our society stood at the edge of darkness. Corruption had reached the highest levels of leadership. Ancient evil nearly returned to devastate our kind. The natural balance established at the First Awakening had been distorted almost beyond recovery. His golden eyes, now permanently flecked with silver since the completed bonding, swept across the assembly. Today we gather not just to crown a queen, but to restore what was lost, to acknowledge that true strength comes not from domination, but from harmony between different natures, to commit ourselves to the three paths as equal expressions of werewolf potential. Catherine stepped forward, bearing a crown unlike any seen in living memory. Where the traditional royal crown was crafted of gold and rubies, symbolizing alpha dominance, this was fashioned from an alloy of silver and gold, interwoven in an intricate pattern, set with moonstones and amber in equal measure. "Serena Moonshade," Magnus continued, his voice softening with evident emotion. "Last descendant of the Balanced Ones, who saved not just a king, but an entire people from corruption, who restored truth when lies had become tradition, who embodies the harmony our ancestors understood and our descendants will embrace." He extended his hand toward her. "Will you accept this crown and the responsibility it represents? Will you stand as warrior queen of the 5 kingdoms, guardian of balance, protector of all 3 paths?" Serena took his offered hand, their bond pulsing with shared purpose as she replied, "Not for power or dominance, but for balance and protection. Not to rule over, but to serve alongside. I accept this crown and all it represents." As Catherine placed the crown upon her head, something remarkable occurred. The silver and gold alloy began to glow with inner light, responding to Serena's moonshade blood and the completed bond she shared with Magnus. The light spread outward in concentric rings, washing over the assembled wolves in gentle waves that carried not dominance but harmony, not submission but alignment. Where the Red Moon Society had sought to control through corruption and fear, this silver-gold light offered healing and balance. Wolves throughout the assembly felt ancient barriers dissolving, not just social divisions between ranks, but internal fragmentation between their human and wolf natures. For generations, werewolves had been taught that their dual nature represented conflict, with either human reason or wolf instinct necessarily dominant. Now they experienced the possibility of true integration, of balance between aspects previously believed irreconcilable. As the light faded, Magnus and Serena turned to face the assembly together, hands still joined. No words were necessary in that moment, the transformation visible in their joined appearance, his strength tempered by her balance, her healing enhanced by his power, demonstrated more eloquently than any speech the future they offered their people. The warrior queen had risen not through conquest or inheritance, but through the courage to stand against corruption when others fled, through the compassion to save lives others had written off as worthless, through the wisdom to recognize that true power came not from dominating others, but from helping them recognize their own unique strengths. As the ceremony concluded and celebrations began throughout Silverhelm, Serena found a quiet moment with Catherine on a balcony overlooking the jubilant city. The Silver Wolf, who had become both mentor and friend during the past year, studied her with evident pride. "Your mother would be proud," she said softly. "Your entire lineage would be proud. 15 generations of moonshades hiding in plain sight, preserving knowledge others sought to destroy, waiting for the moment when balance could be restored." "I still can't believe it sometimes," Serena admitted, touching the crown that now rested comfortably on her brow. "A year ago, I was gathering herbs in the forest, hoping to avoid Beta Reiner's notice, never imagining any of this." "Destiny finds us whether we seek it or not," Catherine quoted Magnus's words from what seemed a lifetime ago. "Though I suspect yours would have emerged eventually, even without the storm. True nature cannot be suppressed forever." Serena's gaze found Magnus across the plaza, where he conversed with delegates from distant territories. Through their bond, she felt his awareness of her attention, the warmth of his response, the profound connection that transcended ordinary relationship. "No," she agreed softly. "It cannot." Her hand drifted to the silver dagger still secured at her ankle, the weapon that had begun her journey from outcast to queen. Moonfire had become a symbol throughout the kingdoms, reproduced in ceremonial form for the new Guardian Order, its image incorporated into the Reformed Council's seal. No longer feared as an instrument of death, silver had been reclaimed as a tool of balance, of healing, of truth. As night fell over Silverhelm, the full moon rose above the mountains, casting silver light across the white city. Wolves throughout the 5 kingdoms paused in their celebrations to acknowledge its presence, not with the old hierarchy's rigid ceremonies, but with the simple reverence of creatures reconnecting with ancient truths long denied. In that moonlight stood the warrior queen, the last Moonshade who had become the first of a new generation. Around her gathered wolves of all paths, their differences no longer defining worth, but contributing to a whole greater than its parts. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but its completion marked not an ending, but a beginning. Balance had returned to the broken wheel, the 3 paths had been restored, and the red shadow had been banished. Not forever, for darkness never truly disappears, but long enough for light to grow strong in its absence. Serena Moonshade, once the weakest wolf in Ironwood Pack, now stood as living proof that true strength came not from dominance, but from harmony, not from power over others, but from power shared among equals. The Omega had become queen, not by changing her nature, but by embracing it fully, by recognizing that what others had deemed weakness was in fact the rarest and most necessary form of strength. The warrior queen in the storm had found not just survival, but purpose, not just acceptance, but belonging, not just power, but balance. And in that balance lay the future of all wolves who sought to walk the 3 paths in harmony.